petition, high school student Jewel Moore asked Disney to consider a plus-size princess character, saying it would help girls who feel ugly for not fitting the skinny standard. Fox and Friends invited Emmy, a plus-size supermodel, and Mimi Roth, a self-described obesity expert, on to discuss the petition.
Beauty within our children's movie and entertainment industry is askew to the thinner side.
Oh, please. Katniss is fit, Mulan was fit, Pocahontas was fit.
Those are a few. Pocahontas? There's a few representations outside of a whole
So you want them to be plus size?
beauty.
You want them to be overweight? This sounds like mob mentality. No, I'm not missing any
plus size. What I'm saying.
It's unhealthy. If you like cancer and diabetes, if you want fertility problems, then plus size is beautiful.
It is important to note that plus size does not mean obese. Plus Model magazine reports that plus size models are on average between the sizes of 6 and 14. For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Sorry your requested website is loading so slowly. Perhaps in the meantime you'd like to watch a Miley Cyrus video or load your New York Times article tomorrow.
I'm Baratunde Thurston from The Onion.
I just did. Was that the right time?
You're listening to the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
A federal appeals court recently struck down the Federal Communications Commission's rule that, until now, has prevented Internet providers from blocking or slowing down some website content and speeding up other content. So, now, Internet providers like Verizon and Comcast can charge websites extra fees to send their content to us at a faster speed. And the law no longer prevents those providers from blocking content that they don't like. In short, the Internet may quickly be for sale to the highest bidder. Now, the FCC could fix all this by reclassifying broadband Internet access as a telecommunications service. That would keep the Internet open to all and protect net neutrality. Unfortunately, the history of the FCC is to buckle to corporate lobbying. There is, however, hope. There is a grassroots movement calling on the FCC to do its job and preserve the openness of the Internet. So, would you take a minute to help preserve freedom of the Internet by going to the ACLU or Free Press website and signing that petition? People who believe in free speech and free inquiry now and in the future will be in your debt.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
Packers.
Vikings. We come from different places.
Uptown.
Downtown. We come to different conclusions.
Half empty.
Half full. But when we live united, we make a real difference in the building blocks of life. Children succeed in school, families gain financial stability, the health of our neighbors improves, and suddenly so do our communities. Real change won't happen without you.
Live united.
So give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Sign up today at liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. The National Labor Relations Board proposed a new rule this week that would shorten the process for union organizing elections. AFL-CIO President Rich Trumka says it's a step in the right direction. Teamsters President Jim Hoffa says his union supports the new rules. Hoffa says it will help stop companies from abusing the legal process to stall elections and delay the union organizing that workers want. The proposed rule change would require businesses to provide email addresses and phone numbers of employees to give unions fair access to the workers in an election. A similar rule was proposed 2 years ago, and business groups challenged it in court. NLRB Chairman Mark Pierce says the new rule will speed up union organizing elections, getting rid of delays and inefficiencies that hurt both workers and employers. At the United Auto Workers Legislative Conference in Washington this week, Vice President Joe Biden told UAW delegates that right-wing forces are waging long-term, intense, concentrated war on the House of Labor. Biden said unions like the UAW are the only ones keeping the barbarians from the gates. Biden says the right to collective bargaining itself is being attacked, and if unions vanish, Biden said, the middle class evaporates. Biden was hailed by UAW President Bob King as a strong and steadfast friend of the UAW.
I still know how to pronounce the word union. Union. One of our problems is not enough elected officials remember how to pronounce the word union. Everybody talks about workers. I talk about unions. Every other worker, white collar and blue collar, not a union member, has figured out the reason they had benefits in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s was because of organized labor.
Roughly 600 workers at 5 nursing homes in Connecticut operated by HealthBridge have had pay cuts imposed on them by bankruptcy courts. The cuts will average about $30 a week. HealthBridge runs 5 union nursing homes and 3 non-union nursing homes in Connecticut. In 2012, worker pensions were eliminated and their health care costs were increased. SEIU Local 1199 is fighting to protect the livelihoods of the workers, and HealthBridge is accused under federal law of alleged union busting.
Fear, intimidation, even racism is part of that plan every day, and we go through a lot of that. Put fear on the workers, we can control them, but they don't never give us a fair chance to say, why we need a union. We need a voice at this plant, and the intimidation and the fear, it really needs to stop.
Keep these worker and union voices on the air by supporting Workers Independent News. Donate now at laborradio.org. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
American citizens everywhere are demanding and supporting speedy and complete action.
Broadcasting from the We Act Radio studios in Washington, D.C., heard live across the nation, this is Take Action News with Carl Frisch.
Many of the world's great movements of thought and action have flowed from the work of a single man.
There is work to be done. The state of our economy calls for action, bold and swift, and we will act.
We will take action when action is required.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm RJ Eskow, and you are listening to Take Action News. Thanks for joining us. We have a lot to talk about today, but before we do, I want to start with something of an announcement. As you may or may not know, the name of this program, Take Action News, was given to it by its first host, David Schuster, who is a fine journalist and a wonderful human being, and we wish him the very best in his new position at Al Jazeera. It was taken over by Carl Frisch, whose name is still on the promo, but we are now taking the program in a slightly different direction. We believe in action. We love action. The only thing we love to hear more than those presidents in the opening segment who are talking about action is presidents actually taking action. So believe me, we're all about the action, and that won't change. But here's what will change about this program: the name. Those of you who have been listening over the last several weeks since we took over know that we've been looking for a new name. We crowdsourced. We went out to you for new name suggestions, and we racked our own brains. We brainstormed here at We Act Radio. Family members, everybody got involved in the act. So I'm here to announce we have a new name for Take Action News. But before I give you that name, let me tell you a little bit about the process we went through. The crowdsourcing came back with some very good suggestions. They said, well, really, what's the theme of your show about? Let's think of some names around the theme. So, okay, excellent point. One of the things we're talking about here and will be talking about is the urgency of the need for action as historical events accelerate, as climate change accelerates, as money increasingly captures the political process, potentially to a point of irreversibility. We'll be talking about technology and its impact on society, including potentially changes in the way we evolve as human beings. We'll be talking about the urgency of creating a society that's fair for everyone as we move into these periods of perilous medical, clinical, scientific, and environmental changes. So we got a lot of suggestions back. As it might not surprise you to learn, many of those suggestions were, well, for lack of a better word, flippant. I will also say that many of those suggestions involved the use of obscenities and four-letter words, not directed at us, but nevertheless totally inappropriate for a show which is broadcast over the public airwaves. So all of you who submitted profane, pornographic, and or obscene names, please accept this sentiment from the bottom of my heart. Thanks for nothing, because you knew we couldn't use them. I will make one exception, because one unprintable name and unspeakable name, which involved that four-syllable word for incest that is sometimes shortened to mofo. We were very fond of that one. Mofo's gots to learn, but there are problems with that too. Number one, It could be seen as condescending towards speakers of dialectical English. Number two, who are we to teach anybody? It implies that if other people have to learn, we're the ones to teach them. And we don't want to ever adopt that tone of arrogance, which is so typical in the broadcast world. We don't know everything for sure. Here, we know some things. We want to share them, but we also want to hear from you. So and lastly, of course, the name is absolutely unthinkable. If the FCC had prison cells or holding cells, we'd wind up in one if we use that full name. So that was discarded, and it got so that I was also using an email list of friends and trying to brainstorm with them, and we were getting nowhere. We had nothing. So finally, I wrote to my list of friends and said, time's up. We need a name. It's the 0 Hour. And then it occurred to me, as if by magic, the 0 Hour. So I threw that out to some of our friends and our listeners, and it got a very positive reaction. So the new name of the program is the 0 Hour with RJ Eskow, and we'll be changing our promotional materials, creating a website around that, and so on. So you'll be hearing more about the name the 0 Hour. Why the 0 Hour? Because that name, that phrase, well, it originated in the military, but what it meant was when everybody synchronized their clocks and counted down, at the moment you went to 0, you went into action. That was meaning number one. Meaning number two of 0 Hour is the meaning I used in my email. The 0 Hour is, hey, time's up. We got to make a decision. We got to act now. And by the way, Act Now is another name for the show, potential name that we liked a lot. Act Now, it was suggested because it had an internal rhyme, Act Now with RJ Eskow. So we thought about that too, but 0 Hour says Act Now, and we need to act now. So you'll be hearing that from us a lot. We'll be changing all our materials. We'll be creating new promos, but basically on the climate, on political corruption, on corporate greed, on unfettered global trade leading to the crushing of the middle class worldwide, we've reached the 0 Hour. So that's our program. That's our theme. That's what we'll be going with. Our guests today will highlight that theme in their own ways. We'll be talking. Well, we'll be talking about everything from our daily lives to the grand sweep of the future. So, for example, we've just had the Super Bowl. We'll be talking about NFL tax dodging in our first segment. By the time we reach our last two segments, we'll be talking about the existence of a potentially habitable planet, even what they call a super habitable planet, right here near to planet Earth in the Alpha Centauri star system. So believe me, we're going to go from football to the depths of space, from the sublime to the ridiculous. But most of all, we're going to be reminding you that it's the time to act, that it's 0 Hour. Time is up. So we want you to bear with us through the name change. We want you to be part of the 0 Hour community. We want you to become regular listeners. We're going to do whatever we can to make the show interesting and engaging so that you will be. As I say, stick around. Besides the two shows I mentioned, we're going to be talking about the new trade deal, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We're going to be talking about, in the words of one author, why it sucks to be poor in this country and why it's expensive to be poor. We're going to be talking about the state of events in West Virginia, and we're going to be talking about a march across New Hampshire to restore democracy. So we have a lot to talk about in the upcoming 3 hours. We have a lot to talk about and discover together here on this program. And I'm going to say now, for the first time, the tagline that you'll be hearing over and over from us as we evolve together on this program. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm RJ Eskow, and this is the 0 Hour. We'll be right back.
If you're planning to replace your Social Security card simply because you don't have it, you may not need to replace it at all. What's most important is that you remember your Social Security number. Remember during school how you memorized information and answers for tests? In the same way, you should memorize your Social Security number. Knowing your number is important, but having the card may not be. If you really do need to get a replacement card to show to an employer, it's easy to apply for a new one. Find out how at www.socialsecurity.gov/SS number.
Sergeant Michelle Garcia served meritoriously in Iraq and has the medals to prove it. Soon after leaving the Navy, Lieutenant Chris Scott found a job, a home, and started a family of his own. Corpsman Richard Stokely took the skills he learned in Vietnam and put them to good use as a paramedic. But soon after leaving the military, each of these veterans fell on hard times and faced homelessness. Even after Michelle lost all her savings, even after Chris wasn't able to pay his mortgage, and even after Richard battled alcoholism for years, they each reached out for help when they needed it most. A simple phone call put them in touch with a trained professional from the Department of Veterans Affairs. That call got Michelle a place to stay until she could afford one of her own, put Chris in touch with employment assistance, and found Richard a substance abuse program. These veterans are success stories not only for how they were able to help others while serving their country, but for how they were able to let others help them. If you know of or are a veteran in need, make the call.
Hey there, Matthew Filipovich here, host of the creatively titled Matthew Filipovich Show, which, by the way, you can hear every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio. Now, I'm going to be honest with you people, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I like talking to smart people who are smarter than me, some of the smartest, funniest, most badass progressives out there. People like Glenn Greenwald, Naomi Klein, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, Jamie Kilstein, Allison Kilkenny, Alan Grayson, Jeremy Scahill, Jim Hightower, and more. That's right, I said more. Don't believe me? Well, tune in to the Matthew Filipovich Show every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. for some of the best in liberal talk, news, comedy, and interviews right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio.
Friends, David Schuster here, and all of us at We Act Radio are so proud of our neighbors here in Southeast D.C., especially one of our partners, the Ark. The Ark is at 1901 Mississippi Avenue Southeast. It's the home to some of Washington's best, including the Washington Ballet, the Levine School of Music, Boys and Girls Club, and the Children's Health Project. All provide a number of programs and services within the very same facility. The Ark is also home to the Ark Theater, the only theater east of the river, which hosts a variety of dance, music, and theatrical shows each year. Almost everything you could want is at the Ark, so stop by and see them. The Ark, 1901 Mississippi Avenue in Southeast. For more information, visit the Ark's website, www.thearkdc.org, or call 202-889-5901. The Ark, part of Southeast D.C.
Gentlemen, this is RJ Eskow speaking, and you are back. This is the Zero Hour, and our next guest is Patrick Ruby, who is, and Patrick, forgive me if I get the name wrong. Of course, when you have a name like Eskow, you're used to people getting it wrong. I collect various pronunciations of my name, but please correct me on that. Patrick writes about sports, among other topics, and he goes at it from an angle I love, which is the cultural and the social, the big picture angle. And according to Patrick's biography, among other things, he's written about the wonderful world of sports conspiracy theories. I love sports conspiracy theories because so many of them are true. And he also wrote about the man, this says, we may have to digress on this if we have time, the man behind the myth of Doc Ellis's LSD no-hitter. And, you know, I mean, if you're a certain age or above, if you remember the 60s, we all pitched no-hitters back then. So I can't believe Doc didn't. Okay, the head-spinning possible murder of Pakistan's national cricket coach, which we could also talk about. But today what we're talking about is what Patrick calls the National Freeloader League, the NFL. Are you with us?
I'm here. That's quite an intro. Thank you.
Well, thank you. We try here on the Zero Hour. Now, two quick questions. Do you prefer Patrick or Pat? And is it Ruby, or did I mispronounce it?
Oh, no. Patrick or Pat's fine, and it's Ruby with a silent H. And, you did pretty well. I've heard some very botched variations, so I'm pretty patient with that. No problem.
Well, I figured it was 2 syllables, so that was my clue. Okay, thanks. And I really wanted to talk to you when I saw this piece on the National Freeloader League for a lot of reasons. I mean, of course, a lot of people felt ripped off by that Super Bowl game just because it was frustrating and disappointing and so on. And, I did hear calls that besides playing the drums and singing and dancing, Bruno Mars might have been tapped to quarterback the Broncos in the second half. But that didn't happen. But you really are frustrated with the NFL, and you make a great case, pulling together a lot of data that they are freeloading off the taxpayer. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, my frustration is that the NFL, in a lot of ways, has adopted the Wall Street business model of privatizing profit and socializing risk. Now, they're not doing it to the extent Wall Street does, but they are doing it. And again, this is a $9 billion+ a year industry. They have money. They're popular. They can afford to pay for the things they need. They don't need taxpayers subsidizing them. They don't need tax handouts. They don't need the lack of oversight we give them when it comes to things like concussions and stuff like that. And here's the thing. In the article, I make this point, they're getting these handouts from us. They're getting over on us. They're getting over us at the state level, at the local level, even at the federal level. Probably the most egregious thing is that the actual league office in New York, where Roger Goodell is in charge, and they set the rules and they negotiate the TV contracts and all that stuff, they're considered tax-exempt organization thanks to a law passed in the 60s by Congress.
So you're saying now the NFL rakes in about $9 billion a year. You wrote they're hoping, which, as you pointed out, and I love this context, more than the gross domestic product of 53 countries, and it plans to reach $25 billion in the next 15 years or so. But they consider it a nonprofit. Now, when I think of a nonprofit, I think of a charity. I think of cancer cures. I think of feeding the hungry. I don't really think of the NFL. How much did Roger Goodell make last year? Do you know?
He made $29.5 million in a single year, which is definitely nice work if you can get it. And that's way more than the head of, say, the United Way makes. I mean, most of the biggest charities you can think of, the CEO might make $1 million, maybe $1.5 million, and we're talking big international charities here that require, pretty top-flight executive talent. So Roger Goodell is blowing those guys away, and women as well. And the thing is, the league, that $9 billion plus, a lot of that is taxed because it's money the teams are making, it's money they're making through television contracts, ticket sales. But the league office, which runs the league, the money it's taking in is not taxed. So every team in the NFL is paying $6 to $8 million a year in dues to the league office. They're writing that money off on their taxes, and the league office itself is not being taxed on any of that money. And the thing is, it's not they're considered a charity, but they're considered a trade group. They're considered the same as your local chamber of commerce. Back in the 60s, Congress had the tax code basically say, if you're a chamber of commerce, if you're a business trade association, you're in the business of promoting like wheat or corn or, business in Scranton, Pennsylvania. We'll give you a tax break. You're a nonprofit. But in this case, law, they actually wrote the specific words "and professional football leagues," which is ridiculous.
And meanwhile they're handing out money like this money to Goodell and Paul Tagliabue, who is no longer even with the league. In 5 years of retirement, you wrote, was paid $46.4 million, I guess, to not work, which is nice work if you can't get it, I guess.
Exactly.
And or don't need it. And I don't know if you looked at this, but can't the IRS, we've had various controversies and so on about the IRS. Can't the IRS, well, I guess they can't because it was written into law. Normally the IRS would be able to go in and say, look, you're not functioning as a trade group, you're functioning as a profit-making organization, and we're going to change your status. But because Congress wrote this into law, I assume that what you're saying is that the IRS doesn't have the power to change this. Is that right?
No, they don't, because the specific language says professional football leagues, which is, honestly, some NFL lobbyist in heaven right now is getting their wings for somehow figuring out a way to get that stuck into an unrelated bill back in the 50s. I live in Washington. I've checked around. Nobody can really figure out how this actually happened. The good news here is that a few people in Congress have actually taken notice of this. Senator Tom Coburn, very conservative senator in Oklahoma, and Angus King, an independent senator, are co-sponsoring a bill to change the law to get rid of this exception, not just for the NFL, but a couple of other sports leagues have found a way to take advantage of this too, the NHL, the PGA Tour. They want to get rid of this exception because it's, rightfully so, it's pretty ridiculous, it's unnecessary, it's basically a government handout that they don't need, and that, I don't know if your listeners watch the news, the rest of us do need money at this point. We're pretty broke as a country right now. And I'm hoping that because it's getting some attention, and so are these senators, that there'll be some public groundswell behind this. There actually is a Change.org petition that has well over 300,000 signatures asking for the same thing. So basically, when people find out that this is going on, whether they're Republican, whether they're Democrat, whether they're liberal, whether they're conservative, whether they like football or hate football, everyone in America basically agrees we don't need to be giving the NFL extra money.
Well, and a couple comments about that. One is, of course, there are those of us who liked football and then hated it after last weekend. But and I should note that Angus King is not the former guitar player for AC/DC, different guy. But we have listeners who
awesome if he was in the U.S. Senate.
It would be totally awesome, but those short pants wouldn't look appropriate in the Capitol building. Having said that, this really should be, I agree with you, this should be an issue that unites liberals and conservatives, Democrats and Republicans, because if you're a liberal, then you believe that the government needs this money to put people back to work and do good things. If you're a conservative, you should believe that the free market should not be corrupted by these tax giveaways, treating one form of entertainment business, which is what the NFL is, preferentially in the way that it's being done. And, it starts to add up. I mean, they throw around big numbers at budget time because they usually use 10-year projections. But if you're talking about the taxes on $9 billion a year, you could expand a lot of people's Social Security with that. So is anybody looking at what the financial impact of this Coburn-King bill might be?
The Coburn-King bill would be, in some ways, as much a symbolic impact as financial. I mean, it would be a couple of $1 million a year, which is, again, nothing to sneeze at. A couple $1 million a year can still fund all kinds of things, or it can be a small, from a conservative perspective, that's a couple $1 million year of taxes you have to raise. So, like you said, whatever side of the spectrum you're on, this is one of those rare issues where pretty much everybody can get together, hold hands, and do something good that they feel good about. But the breaks for the NFL go beyond just the league office being tax exempt. The biggest giveaways, as most people know, are the stadium subsidies. But it's not just the local and the state governments that are paying. Like, for instance, in Minnesota, they're paying more than $500 million to build the Vikings a new stadium, even though the owner of the team is a billionaire.
Right, and you mentioned, by the way, one of the articles mentioned about Minnesota that they have slightly over $1 billion deficit, so that would have been 50% of their deficit if they wanted to use the money that way. So, no, absolutely. I mean, I think what we're seeing, and we're going to, if you're able to listen to the rest of the show or not, I don't know, but we're going to go back to the issue of money in politics. I think what this speaks to is the fact that money, including NFL money, is corrupting the political process from the national level all the way down to the local level. So as we sign out on this, I guess besides passing this law, oh, by the way, there's also a story that the NFL, at least one of the teams, seems to be violating labor laws with cheerleaders and so on. So as we fade out on this, any last word of advice for our listeners on where they can read more of your writing on this topic or how they should follow this story?
Sure. I mean, if you want to read more of what I've written, check out my article in Politico magazine online. It's called the National Freeloader League. You can also follow me. I write regularly at this website called Sports on Earth. So I do a lot of stuff on politics, sports, and culture and how they intersect. And I've written a lot about this topic of sports welfare because, sadly, it's not just the NFL. It's all sports that it sort of has their hand in the public trial.
And you know what's ironic about that, Pat, is that sport is supposed to be the embodiment of free, literal level playing field and free competition among people, and yet when it comes to the economic aspects of sporting, it feels that they don't believe in it.
No, it's kind of like they're using performance-enhancing drugs. The deck is rigged. Like, these leagues are one way or another, they are getting public handouts. And even if we could afford it, they're doing very well in the private market. They don't need the help.
Well, on that note, we're going to have to leave it. We've been talking to Patrick Ruby, who writes for Politico and a number of other magazines on sports and other topics, and the topic has been the National Freeloader League. Pat, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you. Take care.
And this is R.J. Eskow, and we will be back after these announcements with more of the Zero Hour.
You're listening to Take Action News on We Act Radio, produced at the studios of WPWC 1480 AM in Washington, D.C., your nation's capital.
I had a sore in my mouth that just wouldn't go away. And after a couple of weeks, I went to my doctor.
A sore, lump, or thick patch in your mouth or throat could be a symptom of oral cancer.
My doctor told me I was smart to come in. He said that oral cancer is more common in African American men than in any other group in the U.S. It turns out I did have oral cancer, but it was caught early and my treatment was successful. I'm glad I got it checked. That probably saved my life.
If you're an African American man, you need to know about oral cancer. Visit a doctor or dentist if you see changes in your mouth that don't go away after 2 weeks. It's important to get an oral cancer exam because if you do have cancer, the earlier it's caught, the better. A message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, National Institutes of Health.
Jeff, I'm home.
Hey, Mom.
So, what did you do today? I noticed the dishes are still in the sink.
I've been busy.
Getting your taxes done like we talked about?
Oh, I got my friend Dave on that. Hey, he's only charging $20.
Not Dave from your high school class who graduated 3 years late.
Yeah, he's good with numbers. Won our fantasy football league last year.
Jeff, I can't believe you would actually take your...
Kidding, Mom. I took all my paperwork over to that preparer just like you recommended.
Using a paid tax preparer this year? Visit irs.gov for some do's and don'ts. Like look for a preparer who has a preparer tax ID number and signs your return. Check out their qualifications and review your tax return before you sign it.
Oh, Jeff, why do you do this to me?
Mom, you're just so easy.
irs.gov. It's the best tax tip of all.
You know, this used to be a good neighborhood. Now it's a mess. You got all these polyps running around. Stick it in the devil.
Colon cancer almost always starts with the polyp. Get the polyp early and stop colon cancer before it even starts.
Where do you think you were running to, huh?
I didn't even see you guys there. Get the test, get the polyp.
I want to talk to my lawyer!
Get the cure.
I got a phone call!
CD is for everybody, not just for the few. Anyone can share VD with someone.
I'm R.J. Eskow, and this is the Zero Hour. We are back, and in this segment, we're going to talk about the Trans-Pacific Partnership and its relationship to the left and an interesting potential tie-in with the right. We'll be talking with Cole Stangler, who is a staff writer for In These Times, which has been doing great coverage on a variety of economic and labor issues. He covers Congress, corruption, and politics in Washington, according to his biography. Cole, I feel like there's some redundancy in that in your job description, Congress, corruption, and politics. Could that be true?
Yeah, that's a good point. Hard to argue.
Well, thanks for being with us. I don't mean to nitpick. It's great to have you. And you've been writing some great stuff lately, so I wanted to talk to you especially about the Trans-Pacific Partnership and this notion that's come from the right of labeling it Obama trade and criticizing it for its effect on business. And you can tell us a little bit more about it, but you wrote that if Obama trade catches on as a right-wing rallying cry against the TPP, which is a trade agreement, it will probably have something to do with a sparsely attended press conference in which two right-wing business groups joined with Tea Party Nation and the socially conservative Eagle Forum to rail against the TPP and the attempted fast-track vote for it. So tell us a little bit about what you mean by that, if you would.
Right, so, most of the opposition to the TPP, and I should also say it's fast-tracking the procedure, that mostly comes from the left, as everyone knows, labor unions, environmental groups, consumer advocacy groups. But what's happening more recently is that you have these kind of small Tea Party groups that are starting to be concerned about it. And there's a number of issues that actually opponents of the TPP have talked for a while now about trying to, the only way they're going to be able to stop this trade agreement from passing is first off to stop fast track. And fast track authority essentially is Congress has to vote for it, and it would prohibit any amendments. So it essentially shortens debate and makes sure that Congress can only vote up or down on the trade agreement. So the idea basically that opponents have had for a long time is to somehow build a coalition of, a liberal bloc of Congress with some kind of support from the right. And what's interesting to see is now you start to see this kind of strange bloc that has a lot that they're opposed about, but they have some small common ground. You're starting to see that form right now, and there are a number of issues that are part of the Trans-Pacific Partnership that I think would make a lot of conservatives and libertarians angry, and that's why you're seeing that. The first one is there's a whole constitutional discussion about fast track, and so there's this idea that libertarians have argued this, and I think correctly, that Congress should have the authority to negotiate trade agreements, right? So that's part of the Constitution. It's not the executive branch. And so once you grant fast track, you're essentially delegating authority to the executive branch to negotiate the trade agreement. So that's one. There's a constitutional concern. The other big one has to do with national sovereignty. And the TPP, like other trade deals, includes provisions that would expand something that's called investor-state dispute settlement.
Okay, before we get into that, and I do want to get to that, Cole, but before we get there, just to kind of segment out the two issues, on the one hand, I agree, fast tracking, just for those who don't know, and most people do, it means that Congress can't amend, they can't make changes, they have very, very limited ability to even debate it. It's just yes or no, are you for it, basically. And now, on the one hand, I agree it's undemocratic and giving too much power to the executive. On the other hand, putting in the mindset of the people who want to push this bill through, everybody from the president to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the other large corporate interests pushing it, I get why they do that, because I imagine that the behind-the-scenes negotiation to create this bill involved a lot of different trade groups trading off, the rice producers versus the importers of rice products versus, on and on, agriculture versus manufacturing and so on. Just getting those, that's why 600 industry representatives saw it before any member of Congress did. So if you tamper with that, then all of a sudden you're upsetting the negotiation essentially among lobbyists. So I look at something like the press conference that you covered, and I wonder, are these the business interests who weren't invited in the room, whose interests are harmed by this bill, and that's why some of them are opposing it?
Well, I should say it's sort of an interesting collection of people. I think on the one hand, you're right. I think the United States Business and Industry Council represents a lot of these kind of family-owned businesses that have been around for a long time and that stand the most to lose. So the trade deal. So that's part of it. The other thing is the American Jobs Alliance is sort of an interesting collection of individuals. If you go to their website, they have videos of Pat Buchanan debating Joe Biden in video segments, and they come at this from this very kind of old paleo-conservative kind of mindset where trade deals should be negotiated to reflect, the U.S. national interest. And so what they basically are saying is that, these deals are essentially, for the benefit of multinational corporations whose interests are not just about, American workers and American national interests, but really about maximizing profits, globally. So they have this kind of, I would say, not a mainstream kind of critique that you hear from business interests, but it's sort of this old, kind of old school conservative angle. And then you have joined within the Tea Party Nation group, and the Eagle Forum, which Eagle Forum, formed by Phyllis Schlafly, infamous anti-feminist crusader in the 1970s, and they're concerned about the national sovereignty issue, which I was trying to talk about before, where basically these trade agreements would expand the system where corporations have the right to sue governments in third-party courts, and so there's a violation of sovereignty there. They would argue. So
Phyllis Schlafly, who said a woman's place is in the kitchen, and was not in the kitchen when she said it. She was giving a speech. Interesting contradiction in terms, but so there's this jingoistic, basically America first kind of crowd. Then there's people, and I would say about those small businesses, they are the job creators, and the left small business groups would agree with them about this agreement. But let's talk about this loss of national sovereignty just for a minute. We got a minute. Tell us about what that means. Tell us about how this country might, for example, lose its ability to, let's say, keep mercury out of tuna fish or something.
So there are these really extreme investor protections that are included in the TPP and other trade deals where, if the government passes a law that somehow negates what had been promised in this trade deal, then the company can say that they're violating the trade deal and can take them to third-party court. So I think of something like, quick example would be something like a fracking ban, for instance. They have this trade agreement signed, let's say with the U.S. and Europe, and a company in Europe is upset about a fracking ban that takes place in a state where they already had plans to frack the land and drill for gas. They could say, well, this is a violation of the trade agreement. They can sue the United States. The corporation can sue the United States, and they can try the case in one of these third-party courts that are set up by the World Bank.
So in essence, I think what you're saying is this country would give up an element of its sovereignty. We would lose the right as a sovereign nation to say we're banning fracking or we're banning this ingredient in children's food or whatever it might be, because then they would have these corporations would have the ability to sue against that law, and if this private court or secret court or whatever it is ruled in their favor, our own law would be overturned inside the borders of our country. Is that a fair summary?
It wouldn't actually overturn the law, but it would give corporations the ability to essentially circumvent it, right? To decide that they're going to be awarded, a claim or awarded the damages of what the government had done to them. So I'd say also the thing that's most concerning about this, and so when you talk about the TPP and you talk about TTIP, the trade agreement with Europe, is that these are massive economies that you're integrating with the United States. And a lot of these countries, they have subsidiaries that are working in both the U.S. and abroad. So, a company, let's say, that's based in New York, or let's say Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania passes a fracking ban. If a company in Pennsylvania is upset about that, they can essentially get their subsidiary, which is based in, the Netherlands, to sue under the terms of this trade agreement. And so basically when you're incorporating, to massive economies into this agreement, you're essentially just boosting the opportunity for these sorts of lawsuits to take place. Whether or not they're frivolous or not, you're expanding the opportunity for that to happen.
So you're really undermining in many ways the ability of this government to pass laws and regulate business in a meaningful way. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's certainly, as we wrap up, that's certainly what I'm hearing you say. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, that's accurate. If you're a regulator and you know that you have this trade deal that you have to worry about abiding by that, I would imagine that would probably put some doubt in your mind as you're trying to craft new rules.
Well, I hope you'll stay on this story, and I hope you'll come back and talk with us again. Cole Stangler, staff writer for In These Times, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me on.
You bet. I'm RJ Eskow, and this is the Zero Hour. We will be right back after this.
Say you want to go to college. Yay! A Big Ten college. But you don't want to feel like part of the, well, you know. Is there an answer for you? Of course. Indiana University East. Go Red Wolves! Indiana University East. You'll get the quality of a Big Ten education in a small college setting. IU East offers more than 50 fields of study, from accounting to political science, taught by internationally recognized faculty with an average of 18 students per class. So it's not, student number 95A-6273, please report to. It's more like, hey, John, welcome to class. Best of all, you'll graduate with one of the most respected degrees anywhere, a degree from IU. Don't wait. Go to iue.edu or call 800-959-EAST to arrange a visit to Indiana University East. IU. Focused on you.
I had a sore in my mouth that just wouldn't go away.
Education beyond high school. A path to opportunity and success for our young people. And the key to building a better life for themselves and ultimately their own children. But for many, all this is only a dream. Because the challenge of paying for education beyond high school seems to put this opportunity out of reach. But there is an organization that can help. Each year we award $80 billion in grants, low-interest loans, and work-study to students in colleges, trade schools, and professional schools. We are Federal Student Aid, part of the U.S. Department of Education. You can learn more by logging on to federalstudentaid.ed.gov. We may be able to help you realize your dreams, so don't get left behind. After all, the most costly education is the one not begun. Federal Student Aid. Start here, go further.
Take Action News is proud to be sponsored by Healthcare for America Now. HCAN is a national coalition of more than 1,000 groups in 50 states, representing 30 million people. HCAN works to promote, defend, implement, and improve the Affordable Care Act at both the state and federal levels. They also try to protect Medicare and Medicaid, increase corporate accountability, and confront forces that seek to take away critical services. HCAN believes in creating jobs, not cutting programs people depend on. HCAN runs comprehensive issue campaigns that mobilize people at the grassroots and define the public debate. HCAN is fighting to protect, implement, and improve the new health care law through national and state-based legislative and regulatory campaigns built on grassroots action, public education, communications, policy analysis, and groundbreaking research. HCAN has become a respected voice and national leader on health care while continuing to focus on aggressive field activity. Support HCAN, Healthcare for America Now.
When you go on a road trip, you're careful. You follow the signs to arrive at the right place. It's the same online. Read the internet signs along the way, or you may be led astray. For example, look for the .gov at the end of the web address. If it isn't .gov, it isn't the real Social Security website. People are often victimized by misleading advertisers who use terms like Social Security or Medicare to trick the public. These companies charge a fee for free Social Security services. These services include changing your name and getting a new Social Security card. There's no need to pay for services Social Security offers for free. Go to www.socialsecurity.gov. And remember, if it isn't .gov, it isn't Social Security.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm RJ Eskow, and this is the Zero Hour. And speaking of zero hours and the need for action, we've been seeing an ongoing struggle over the Social Security and Medicare programs, and Social Security in particular, and we're going to be talking with our next guest about that. Richard Fiesta is the executive director at the Alliance for Retired Americans, which is a 4 million member organization working to create an America that protects the health and economic security of retirees and older Americans, which is something that, God willing, if we live long enough, we will all eventually become. Rich, thanks so much for being with us.
Great, and thanks for having me, RJ. Glad to be with you.
You bet. Now, listen, I wanted to talk to you especially about Social Security today, because this is an issue that I follow very closely. I used to work in the private sector and in retirement benefits and a lot of related issues. In fact, one of your former organizations, you used to work at Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation in the Clinton administration, and they guarantee one of my own benefits should I ever live long enough to retire, because that corporation, like many Wall Street organizations, played fast and loose, and our pension fund wound up being administered by you guys. So I hope you set a good groundwork for those folks. But this is an issue I study a lot, write about a lot, and people were upset when President Obama unilaterally put a benefit cut to Social Security in the form of lower inflation calculations in last year's budget. Now, there have been recent reports that his economic advisors are refusing to say whether that benefit cut will appear in his upcoming budget, which should be released shortly. Do you have any thoughts on that subject? What does your organization think, and where are you on this?
Well, we think the administration would be wise to not put the chain CPI into the budget, which everyone expects now will be released on March 4th. So we're not that far away from it.
Right.
It was, at least according to the administration's explanation of it, one of their bargaining chips or little bright, shiny objects that they were dangling in front of the Republicans in order to get those two words none of us liked, grand bargain, 2, 3, 4 years ago. And obviously the Republicans didn't take the bait. So there, as we know, no grand bargain. There's not going to be a grand bargain, which actually could have hurt Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid a lot more. So our view, the Alliance for Retired Americans, is why put it in? It's not going anywhere. It's a terrible thing. It's a benefit cut to a program that has a surplus and that has no relationship at all to our fiscal structure and our debt. So we're advocating, and I know a lot of people in Congress are, and a lot of advocates around the country, that do us all a favor and don't put it in the budget this year.
Now, you make a very important point here, because, you know, we're constantly hearing that the White House may feel one way, but they feel they have to move another way to compromise with the Republicans. And, you know, honestly, I was part of an off-the-record briefing by a very senior administration official years ago suggesting that, in fact, they like this chain CPI benefit cut, but whether or not they do almost doesn't matter in one sense, which is, and this is what I want to get your thoughts on. I think part of what you're saying, when you say why put it in if you're not going to get the grand bargain and therefore it's not going to become law, aren't you really also saying that we're not talking enough? We're talking about Social Security as if it's a cost item and not as if it's something that benefits millions and millions of Americans?
Exactly. It's sometimes you get these people with these green eye shades, and they just look at numbers such as Social Security, for example, and they just don't see the great national benefit that a program like Social Security has. It's without it, 40% of people over 65 would be living in poverty. It's the best children's anti-poverty program, because it's not only an old age retirement policy, it's if you have a worker in the workplace who dies during his or her working life, the surviving spouse and the children are taken care of. If you become disabled while you're working, there's a disability program too. So it's kind of America's family insurance policy that why would we tinker with it when it works so well? 1 out of 4 households, in some states a lot higher, has Social Security benefits coming into it under one of these programs, and we should be celebrating it, not looking to cut it or demean it.
Well, I'm so glad that you said that. I'm so glad that you mentioned what I consider to be the magic word in all of this, which is insurance. You know, that company that I told you about where my little tiny pension is now under the Pension Guarantee Fund's administration. I was the green eye shade guy, okay? I was the guy who did the numerical calculations on all of this stuff. And, you know, a lot of people forget, and it was an insurance company primarily. A lot of people forget that Social Security is not a budget item in the classic sense. Yes, I mean, technically in one way it is, but Social Security is required by law to be self-supporting, which is why people worry that 30 years out there might be, you know, a slight deficit in the benefits if something isn't done. But it cannot, when you talk about the green eye shades guys, it cannot be added to general costs of the government. Right, so we're really talking about some of the other ideas. You know, lowering the if I got hit. Look, I pay my car insurance. If I got hit by a drunk driver, and I got benefits for the rest of my life as a result, you wouldn't cut my benefits after I got hit because I paid my premium. Is Social Security really that different? Why don't people have a right to the benefit once they've paid into it for all their lives?
That's right. I mean, it is our Social Security program. It's we working people, employees who pay into it, and our employers pay into it equally, up to, you know, a cap. It's another issue we can talk about, raising the cap and
sure.
Making it more fiscally sound. But it is our Social Security and our program with our guaranteed benefits. You know, there's no government money involved in the operation and the administration of the program. It's a wonderfully administered program with private sector money, if you look at it that way.
Well, let me, you know, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the flip side of this, and since you mentioned it, which is the growing movement to actually expand Social Security's benefits. You know, the National Academy of Social Insurance, as you know, did a study. Most people, including I think a plurality or majority of Republicans, want to see the program expanded. They'd be willing to pay more in taxes. You talked about the payroll tax cap, which currently insulates millionaires and billionaires from paying as much as lower middle class and lower income people do for Social Security. There are different ways to do this and creative things to do it, but shouldn't we, it's a loaded question obviously from my point of view, should we be talking about expanding Social Security? And B, if so, how do we shift the conversation in Washington towards where most of the people are, which is wanting that expansion?
Right, you're right. You're dead on here, RJ, because Social Security benefits are modest compared to all of our peer countries around the world. They don't buy. They've lost buying power to inflation over the last 30, 40 years or so, and there are pieces of legislation, and one way to talk about expanding Social Security is to have legislation in and look at it that way. Senator Tom Harkin with Congresswoman Linda Sanchez, Harkin from Iowa, Sanchez from California, have a bill in to expand benefits. Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont has been a leader. Senator Nick Begich of Alaska has a bill in. Congressman Ted Deutsch of Florida. So there are lots of ways and lots of people. Elizabeth Warren, the new senator from Massachusetts, gave a terrific speech just in the last few weeks on the need to expand Social Security. So I think there's a small but growing, more loudly drumbeat on it's time to expand Social Security. We can do it. We can afford it. As you know, private pensions aren't in the workforce to the extent they were even 20 or 30 years ago. So more people need this program
Rich,
in their retirement.
Absolutely. I think we're going to have to hold it there, but I see that public communications is in your background too, so we're going to have to get you back and talk about how to get the media to be covering more of these initiatives and more of these stories. But in the meantime, thanks so much for being with us. We've been speaking with Richard Fiesta, who is Executive Director for the Alliance for Retired Americans. Rich, thanks for being with us.
Great to be with you, RJ.
You bet. I'm RJ Eskow, and we'll be right back. This is the Zero Hour.
I'm Gary Johnson, former governor of New Mexico. Last year, my state became the 12th state to allow medical use of marijuana by patients who are seriously ill. Some people were surprised that a Republican governor supports medical marijuana, but I'm hardly alone. Groups like the American College of Physicians, American Nurses Association, and American Public Health Association have all acknowledged the medical value of marijuana. New research about medical marijuana is coming out almost every day, showing remarkable potential in all sorts of serious conditions, including cancer, AIDS, and chronic pain. But some in government still want to put politics and ideology ahead of public health. To learn more about medical marijuana and what you can do to help, contact the Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or visit them on the web at mpp.org. Thanks.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM, broadcasting live from Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue in D.C.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. The National Labor Relations Board proposed a new rule this week that would shorten the process for union organizing elections. AFL-CIO President Rich Trumka says it's a step in the right direction. Teamsters President Jim Hoffa says his union supports the new rules. Hoffa says it will help stop companies from abusing the legal process to stall elections and delay the union organizing that workers want. The proposed rule change would require businesses to provide email addresses and phone numbers of employees to give unions fair access to the workers in an election. A similar rule was proposed 2 years ago, and business groups challenged it in court. NLRB Chairman Mark Pierce says the new rule will speed up union organizing elections, getting rid of delays and inefficiencies that hurt both workers and employers. At the United Auto Workers Legislative Conference in Washington this week, Vice President Joe Biden told UAW delegates that right-wing forces are waging long-term, intense, concentrated war on the House of Labor. Biden said unions like the UAW are the only ones keeping the barbarians from the gates. Biden says the right to collective bargaining itself is being attacked, and if unions vanish, Biden said, the middle class evaporates. Biden was hailed by UAW President Bob King as a strong and steadfast friend of the UAW.
I still know how to pronounce the word union. Union. One of our problems is not enough elected officials remember how to pronounce the word union. Everybody talks about workers. I talk about unions. Every other worker, white collar and blue collar, not a union member, has figured out the reason they had benefits in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s was because of organized labor.
Roughly 600 workers at 5 nursing homes in Connecticut operated by HealthBridge have had pay cuts imposed on them by bankruptcy courts. The cuts will average about $30 a week. HealthBridge runs 5 union nursing homes and 3 non-union nursing homes in Connecticut. In 2012, worker pensions were eliminated and their health care costs were increased. SEIU Local 1199 is fighting to protect the livelihoods of the workers, and HealthBridge is accused under federal law of alleged union busting.
Fear, intimidation, even racism is part of that plan every day, and we go through a lot of that. Put fear on the workers, we can control them, but they don't never give us a fair chance to say, why we need a union. We need a voice at this plant, and the intimidation and the fear, it really needs to stop.
Keep these worker and union voices on the air by supporting Workers Independent News. Donate now at laborradio.org. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Over 13 million people are affected by famine, war, and drought in the Horn of Africa. Unfortunately, just listening to this commercial won't help them. Just listening won't give them their next meal, or shelter, or hope. You can help by texting GIVE to 777-444 to donate $10, and by going to usaid.gov/FWD to forward the facts. Brought to you by the Ad Council and USAID. Text donations go directly to Consortium of Humanitarian Relief Organizations. Standard text and data rates apply.
Were you invited to the big doings in Davos? You know, the annual powwow of power elites held in that posh resort town in the Swiss Alps. The World Economic Forum, as it's formally called, brings together a bunch of corporate chieftains, the heads of state from various countries, an A-list of entertainment sparklies, and a horde of economists, consultants, and lesser politicos trying to get noticed. The theme of this year's Wine, Dine, and Shine show was the reshaping of the world. How modest is that? But you can't expect modesty from an event that's been dubbed, quote, a velvet rope club for the 1% of the 1%. Or, as the mayor of London once put it, a constellation of egos involved in massive mutual orgies of adulation. Maybe that's why the big news from Davos this year was not who attended, but the platinum-level biggies who spurned the invite, such as Warren Buffett, along with the honchos of Apple, Facebook, and Google. It seems that many are put off by the declining level of speakers and panelists. As if to emphasize that decline, the forum organizers even brought in Governor Rick Oops Perry of Texas to be on a healthcare panel. Now that's industrial-strength chutzpah. After 14 years as governor, Perry's state still has a fourth of its people with no health insurance, the ugliest performance of all 50 states. Indeed, if Davos attendees need an example of how a public official who enjoys government-paid health care can so crassly deny any coverage to millions of the less fortunate, Perry's their man. This is Jim Hightower saying, adding to the forum's unintended satire of elites without a clue, a major sub-theme this year was how to address economic inequality. One way would be to invite at least one person who's on the receiving end of inequality. Maybe one of Rick Perry's uninsured constituents.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
American citizens everywhere are demanding and supporting speedy and complete action.
Broadcasting from the We Act Radio studios in Washington, D.C., heard live across the nation, this is Take Action News with Carl Frisch.
Many of the world's great movements of thought and action have flowed from the work of a single man.
There is work to be done. The state of our economy calls for action, bold and swift, and we will act.
We will take action when action is required.
Oh, yes, our presidents love to talk about action. And boy, that FDR, he knew how to do it. I'm RJ Eskow, and this is the Zero Hour. Some action would be great right about now. Okay, now, in the last hour, we heard from Patrick Ruby, who told us about what he calls the National Freeloader League and all the tax benefits that that our football billionaires are receiving at your expense and mine. And we'd like to change that. We'd like to get the National Football League and its franchises away from their culture of dependency. See, the National Football League and the football franchises have become dependent. The tax breaks we give them, the other assistance we give them, the stadiums we build them, the zoning laws we break or nullify on their behalf have made them dependent. And we want them to be able to think for themselves, the billionaires who own the franchises, the multimillionaires who are paid $20, $30, $40 million as retirees from running the NFL. We want to get them off their culture of dependency. So I say this now to the owners, the franchisees, the leaders, the commissioners, the members of the National Football League. Help us help you. Help us help you get off your culture of dependency and stand for yourself. Get out of the 47% that are leaning on the, okay, I can go on forever like this, but I won't. So we heard from Patrick on the NFL, and we're going to be on the NFL. We're not getting off the NFL. We're not getting off any of these major corporations that, which is what the NFL is, that suckle at the public teat, to use a phrase that probably Rush Limbaugh would be more comfortable speaking than I am. It makes me uncomfortable. I'm not Alan Simpson or one of those people. But anyway, that's what they do. So we'll stay on them. And last hour, we also heard from Cole Stangler from In These Times about the TPP and what's the through line between the NFL and the TPP? Again, you know, free trade, it's not an inevitability. It's not a force of nature, what they call free trade. These global deals that benefit certain forms of corporations, that give corporations the ability to sue sovereign governments for their decisions to protect their own people, whether it be from fracking or environmental pollution of other kinds, or mercury in the tuna, whatever it might be. These are not forces of nature. This is another form of government helping corporations. So we're going to be all about that here on the Zero Hour. That's our new name. I know our material still says Take Action News, but it still says Carl Frisch and David Schuster, the previous hosts, too. So we'll get on that. But so we talked with Cole Stangler, and we talked with Richard Fiesta about cuts to Social Security, which Rich is the head of the National Association. I never get these things right. Alliance for Retired Americans. What are we going to be talking about in this hour? Well, we're going to continue on the theme that, who's really getting a handout in this country. We'll be talking to my friend Dave Johnson about why it's expensive to be poor, and Dave has the lowdown on that. We're going to go back to West Virginia, which we covered extensively after the initial poisoning of the drinking water there. We'll be talking about what's going on now in West Virginia, and we will also be talking about the new atheism. One of the other things we do or want to do here on what we used to call Take Action News is talk about the big issues that are facing us, and not with any fear of getting into a little bit of controversy. Okay, religion is still a major force of life in most Americans' daily inner workings, if you want to call it inner lives, and most of the world's. We'll be talking about religion, and we won't be taking reflexive positions for or against any religion, for or against disbelief. We'll be talking to a lot of people and challenging a lot of assumptions. It's our feel. Well, you'll hear more. I don't want to spoil that whole segment by telling you now what we're going to do then. But I do want to talk a little bit more about the conversation with Rich Fiesta and Social Security, because I think it's very important here. One of the things we called it the flow in our last iteration of this program, which was the breakdown on We Act News. And the idea behind the flow is that, if you could see all the news events that are influencing your lives, all the economic forces influencing our lives, all the cultural forces influencing our lives, if you could view them from 50,000 miles in space, you'd see these sort of shifting forces of economics and money flowing through and affecting the way we look at everything from popular culture to technology to politics, and that there are underlying tectonic economic forces at work here. And Social Security is a great example of that. Here we have news media who are obsessed with the idea that Social Security is going broke, which it's not by any reasonable definition of the term broke. It will have a certain shortfall in 30 years unless you do what vast majorities of the public from left to right want, which is to get rid of the artificial cap that exempts millionaires and billionaires from having their higher income support Social Security. Social Security should actually be expanded, but there's a cultural kind of, it's fascinating. It's like being an anthropologist visiting a hidden tribe when I go to D.C. and talk to, for example, the Treasury of the Secretary, which I did when he was Tim Geithner, about Social Security, and realize that, or whether it's NPR broadcasters or anyone else, and realize that you're not just fighting misunderstandings about the economics of Social Security or the actuarial workings of it, you're fighting a kind of cultural binding force that says in order to be a member of our tribe, you have to believe certain things. And one of the things you have to believe is that Social Security needs to be cut. There's a point in every conversation you have inside the Beltway establishment about Social Security where it's almost like there's a children of the damned look in the eyes of the people you're talking to. Well, they will say, as Martha Raddatz did during one of the presidential debates, ABC broadcaster, well, everybody knows you need to cut Social Security. One of the things we're going to do here on the Zero Hour is point out that a lot of times when you hear the phrase, well, everybody knows, ... you're really repeating folkways and cultural brainwashing, not analytical truth, because we're all about analytical truth here on the Zero Hour. And when it comes to America's retirement crisis, we are approaching the Zero Hour. So that's going to be a regular theme for us. But meanwhile, stick around. We'll have Dave Johnson talking about well, not to be too folksy about it, but in Dave's words, why it sucks to be poor. And we'll be talking about these other critical issues as well, which if I had my act together, I'd be telling you right now. But I will tell you this. It's important that you stay and listen because you're going to be informed by what happens next. I'm RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero Hour. We'll be right back.
Our children are exposed to violence every day, in their neighborhoods, in their schools, even in their own homes. Exposure to violence can have a devastating and lifelong impact. Through community action and leadership at the national level, we're identifying the children who need our help. I'm Attorney General Eric Holder, and I'm asking those of you who have a role in a child's life to take action. Through your attention and early intervention, we can help children in need to heal, to thrive. Together, we can change their lives and their futures.
Join the Justice Department in defending childhood.
100% success rate in modifying free consultations at 10%.
Does this sound familiar? If you're in need of assistance with your mortgage, be careful where you turn for help. Loan modification scammers will offer deals too good to be true. Learn the signs so your life won't be turned upside down. Know it, avoid it, report it. For more information or to report a scam, call 1-888-9950 or visit hud.gov/prevent-loan-scams.
As a National Guard or Reserve member, you served your country. Now let VA serve you.
I wouldn't be here today as a successful woman without the help that I received.
Your VA honors your service by providing a wide range of veterans benefits. From home loans to job training, VA benefits can help with some of life's toughest challenges.
What's important about VA benefits is they don't just touch you as an individual. They can touch your parents, maybe your grandparents, your child.
Go to benefits.va.gov/Guard Reserve to learn more, including how to apply online using e-benefits.
I just finished a master's degree recently, and now I'm working on another degree as well. So the military made that all possible. My veterans benefits made that all possible.
No matter what the time is, apply for your benefits. You earn them. VA is ready to help you.
Achieve your next mission. Learn about and apply for your VA benefits today.
Friends, David Schuster here, and all of us at WEAC Radio are so proud of our neighbors here in Southeast D.C., especially one of our partners, the Ark. The Ark is at 1901 Mississippi Avenue Southeast. It's the home to some of Washington's best, including the Washington Ballet, the Levine School of Music, Boys and Girls Club, and the Children's Health Project. All provide a number of programs and services within the very same facility. The Ark is also home to the Ark Theater, the only theater east of the river, which hosts a variety of dance, music, and theatrical shows each year. Almost everything you could want is at the Ark, so stop by and see them. The Ark, 1901 Mississippi Avenue in Southeast. For more information, visit the Ark's website, www.thearkdc.org, or call 202-889-5901. The Ark, part of Southeast D.C. WEAC Radio is a very proud partner of the Start at Westminster, a harm reduction, prevention, and awareness initiative sponsored by the Westminster Presbyterian Church right here in D.C. START stands for Syringe, Treatment, Advocacy, Resources, Training. These are the core elements of the harm reduction philosophy at START. The goal of this program is to reduce transmissions of HIV, hepatitis, and other bloodborne infectious diseases by empowering those at risk of infection with the tools, resources, and referrals they need to take charge of their health. Over the past year, the Start at Westminster tested over 1,600 people, and they're averaging about 150 tests each month. And of course, with the proper funding, that number could go even higher. For more information on this terrific program, go to www.startatwestminster.org. Or visit the Westminster Presbyterian Church, 400 I Street Southwest, right here in Washington, D.C.
And we are back. This is RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero Hour. Dave Johnson is our next guest. Dave is a good friend of mine, but don't hold that against him. He is a senior fellow, as am I, at the Campaign for America's Future, although I'm upgrading to Jolly Good Fellow shortly. I haven't told you that, Dave. And also a senior fellow with Renew California, and he has just written an article on why it's expensive to be poor. I think he's going to follow up with why it's cruel to be kind and why it's hip to be square. But, Dave, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, Richard. It's great to be here.
Well, listen, you do great work. I'm a big fan of your work, and I think you're too nice to the administration sometimes, but I'm a big fan of your work. And this is a great piece because, look, as you point out, we actually have a situation where the Wall Street Journal called the poor lucky duckies during the Bush administration because they pay very little taxes. But first of all, leaving aside the fact that, of course, they pay a lot in taxes when you count sales taxes and payroll taxes and so on, the working poor or even the non-working poor, so it's incorrect. The notion that the poor are somehow lucky is part of this punitive attitude that people have towards the working or indigent poor. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. So what does it mean when you say it's expensive to be poor?
Well, first of all, Republicans talk about all the things people get, not just that they don't pay federal income taxes like, at a very high rate, but they like to talk about cell phones a lot, and the other things they supposedly get. But the fact is, it does suck to be poor. It actually does. But the surprising thing here is that so many people are either in the poverty level or not far above the poverty level. Half of Americans qualify for that, and 76% are living what's called paycheck to paycheck, meaning that one car accident, one medical problem, and they fall into that trap of being poor. Poor is very expensive because all of a sudden all these things that we take for granted, if we have an income, if we have savings, go away, and all of a sudden things start to cost a lot. The big
give me an example. Give me an
Sure.
example of
Sure. Well, the first obvious example is transportation. If you don't have savings, a down payment, et cetera, you're stuck. You either have to try to get $350 to get a car that costs $350, which means it's going to last about a week, or until you have to get something major fixed. That's expensive, getting stuff fixed. They're gas hogs. That's expensive, getting to work when you're getting 15 miles a gallon. Okay, transportation's expensive, and if you don't have a car, it's expensive not only in that municipal transit systems are, in terrible shape, unfunded, etc. They've raised rates, but you can take a tremendous amount of time. It can cost you a lot in time to get to work. And if you have to have two jobs, you're not talking about a lot of sleep. And often you have to have two jobs if you're lucky enough to get a job when you're poor. Then there's the next thing, and this is largely invisible to policymakers, so this one's really important. And you wrote about this just the other day, is that if you're poor, you don't have and probably can't get a bank account. And even if you do have a bank account, if you're poor, you're going to be getting all these fees. You don't have the minimum balance required, fees. You might bounce a check, fees. You not only bounce a check, but they set it up so that once you bounce a check, they set it up so that the large check comes first, and then they bounce all the small things you wrote or ATM after that. So very expensive.
Let me just jump in for a second, Dave. I think the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau put a stop to that. I'm not sure, but we can check.
Well, that's great, but you still you're paying $35 if you bounce a check.
You bet.
And if you're not making a lot of money, or if you don't have a job, that's an incredible amount of money. But beyond that, a lot of people don't even qualify for bank accounts. You wrote about this idea that the post office could be a source of a bank account for a lot of people, so they could just go in and cash their checks there and not have to rely on payday lenders. See, there's the next place that's expensive is if you don't have a bank account, then you're dependent on things like the check cashing services, the payday lenders, and all of those. And there's a place where it's immediately very expensive. What
Absolutely.
happens
And you mentioned another area which I really love to get into, because I think this is really important and people don't realize it, which is eating.
Oh, yeah. See, first of all, you got to have a place to live, and you don't have first, last, and deposit, right? You're living somewhere where you can get in with cash, etc. You're living in a week-to-week motel, etc. These are the kind of things that are so invisible to so many policymakers, too. If you're living in a week-to-week place, then that means you don't have a stove or a refrigerator, most likely, and you're dependent on fast food, okay, nearby. Transportation means you're nearby, okay, so the problems all start to add up the minute you fall into this. But not only that, even if you can buy groceries, you're not living in the best areas. Transportation's a problem. You're dependent on these kind of local corner stores, etc. Things are really expensive. So right away, you're paying more for almost everything that people who have savings stuff take for granted. You're paying
and I
more
want to
for all of
digress.
those, too.
I think these are great points, and I want to digress for a second and also point out that, one of the other offensive things that's said about poor people, particularly inner city poor people, well, I go down there and these are basically racist, rich people talking. I go down there and they're all overweight and they're this and that. Well, the fact is, there have been studies done, as you know, that lower income communities, they don't have the holistic grocery stores. They don't have the low cost vegetables and fruits are much more expensive in inner city supermarkets and if you can get to one, and so people are forced to rely on fast foods. Maybe the only thing within walking distance is a 7-Eleven that sells Doritos and Slurpees and so on. So you're really talking about a cycle not only of it being expensive to be poor but unhealthy to be poor. So I'm really glad you brought that up. Then you talk about getting paid, the problem getting paid.
Yeah, you not only have the problem of getting paid, but then you have the problem of not getting paid. The first one is getting paid is that you've got to cash your check. Okay, that's one example of another part of the trap of being poor. Then there's even better than getting paid, though, is not getting paid because of wage theft. That is a huge problem that many of the people in the low end of things, they're very vulnerable, they're so dependent on the job, etc. Getting paid, places like Walmart now pay you with a debit card kind of thing, and you have fees. Unless you buy from Walmart, you have fees. So it's like a company store situation, and the debit card, has its fees and everything, and then not getting paid. You're forced to work overtime. Walmart got caught on that one, but other places too. You're forced to supposedly voluntarily sign away your lunchtime. Tips are a big one. If you work at a place where there's tips, your tips can get stolen. It's this pervasive problem, again, invisible to policymakers. So
you really, I have to say I really compliment you on this piece because it paints a vivid, which is available at Alternet and Swan, which paints a vivid picture of what it's like to be poor, and brought up some memories actually. But you talk about financial scams, which is connected to what you were saying about the difficulty getting paid and the debit cards and payday lenders and so on. And you also mentioned as number 8, and I really appreciated this, even the little things, laundromat.
Yeah, the laundromat. You have to go to a laundromat if you're poor. Once again, invisible to policymakers. One of these kinds of things. Laundromats are another example. Low pay, of course. When you're poor, you end up in a low pay job, and then washing your clothes. You might have to purchase bottled water. Of course, everybody in West Virginia is purchasing bottled water right now, but you might have to purchase bottled water. That's another one. That's expensive because of where you live. So it is a trap that you fall into, and then once you start down the path of that, and all of the people living paycheck to paycheck understand now that they're one paycheck away, laid off, car problem, medical emergency, sick child, etc., from falling into this trap, then you fall into the trap. I really want to point out, before we run out of time,
sure,
and give out a big warning of one of the biggest problems of this trap, and that is debt. Because the minute you don't have enough money to get by, people then tend to borrow, especially people who are not particularly sophisticated about this. Is if you borrow money to get through this pay period, what's going to happen is that the next period you're going to be just as short as you were this period, but now you owe that money you borrowed plus some kind of phenomenal interest rate to whoever you borrowed that from, which means that you necessarily will fall further and further behind.
And this is, I mean, the company store is the ideal analogy on a national level. We're really talking about, a cycle of poverty and the ways that we got trapped in that. So, yeah. Dave Johnson, I want to thank you so much for joining us. We'll have you back. And as you wrote, inequality is costing us today. The 3,000 richest Americans make more than the poorest 23 million. That can only last so long. So Dave Johnson, Senior Fellow with the Campaign for America's Future, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Richard.
You bet. And we will be right back after this with more stories on how your world's really working. I'm R.J. Eskow, and this absolutely is the Zero Hour.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
If you're planning to replace your Social Security card simply because you don't have it, you may not need to replace it at all. What's most important is that you remember your Social Security number. Remember during school how you memorized information and answers for tests? In the same way, you should memorize your Social Security number. Knowing your number is important, but having the card may not be. If you really do need to get a replacement card to show to an employer, it's easy to apply for a new one. Find out how at www.socialsecurity.gov/SS number.
Say you want to go to college. Yay! A Big Ten college. But you don't want to feel like part of the, well, you know. Is there an answer for you? Of course. Indiana University East. Go Red Wolves! Indiana University East. You'll get the quality of a Big Ten education in a small college setting. IU East offers more than 50 fields of study, from accounting to political science, taught by internationally recognized faculty with an average of 18 students per class. So it's not, student number 95A-6273, please report to. It's more like, hey John, welcome to class. Best of all, you'll graduate with one of the most respected degrees anywhere, a degree from IU. Don't wait. Go to iue.edu or call 800-959-EAST to arrange a visit to Indiana University East. IU. Focused on you.
Take Action News is proud to be sponsored by Healthcare for America Now. HCAN is a national coalition of more than 1,000 groups in 50 states, representing 30 million people. HCAN works to promote, defend, implement, and improve the Affordable Care Act at both the state and federal levels. They also try to protect Medicare and Medicaid, increase corporate accountability, and confront forces that seek to take away critical services. HCAN believes in creating jobs, not cutting programs people depend on. HCAN runs comprehensive issue campaigns that mobilize people at the grassroots and define the public debate. HCAN is fighting to protect, implement, and improve the new health care law through national and state-based legislative and regulatory campaigns built on grassroots action, public education, communications, policy analysis, and groundbreaking research. HCAN has become a respected voice and national leader on health care while continuing to focus on aggressive field activity. Support HCAN, Healthcare for America Now.
Hello, my name is Jim Gray, and I am a judge of the Superior Court in California and a former federal prosecutor in Los Angeles. I would like to talk to you for a moment about marijuana. Did you know that since the federal government first banned marijuana in 1937, usage in this country has actually gone up by about 4,000%? Or did you know that in the Netherlands, where adults are allowed to possess small amounts of marijuana and buy it from government-regulated businesses, fewer adults and fewer teenagers smoke marijuana than here in our country? or that an American is arrested on marijuana charges every 38 seconds. If you are wondering if any of this makes sense, you are not alone. To find out more, contact the Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or visit them on the web at mpp.org. Thank you, and good luck to us all.
I'm RJ Eskow, and we are back. This is the Zero Hour. And as we discussed earlier, I really want to get back to the topic of West Virginia, and I'm really looking forward to talking to our next guests, as I look forward to talking to all of our guests. But Mary Lynn Evans is the CEO and executive producer for Evening Star Productions. She's a filmmaker. She's done a number of films on West Virginia, a state where she grew up, where she has a coal mining family. She produced a 3-hour award-winning PBS series called The Appalachians, Coal Country, Low Coal, and now Blood on the Mountain, which is, in what I believe is her words, the true history of West Virginia, shown as a canary in a coal mine for the country. And besides finding out what's going on in West Virginia today, I want to talk about that idea a little more. So, Mary Lynn, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's a joy to hear someone say, I'd like to talk about West Virginia. And it's a sad thing when I'm the canary in a coal mine talking to you today from West Virginia.
Well, you know, the thing about being a canary in a coal mine is that it's a warning that there's danger, but it's also about the worst job in the coal mine is to be the canary. And so I did want to talk to you. I've spent some time in West Virginia. I have a great feeling for the state and its people, and I do feel there's something to that principle that you described. So first of all, but I'd like to start by saying, you know, we covered the poisoning of the groundwater there when it happened, and a little bit afterwards, and gave some folks ways that they could help and chip in and contribute and so on. But the story seems to have almost disappeared from the news nowadays. And what's the latest? What's the status there now?
Well, actually, it shouldn't have disappeared from the news because the story is just continuing to grow and to get worse. At this point, approximately 300,000 people in southern West Virginia, typically referred to as the coal fields, really do not trust their water. And, you know, in making the film Blood on the Mountain, you know, it's like doing the autopsy of 150 years of West Virginia history. And it's so unbelievable, I don't think people could have believed it until this happened. Because this is what you get after 150 years of corporations and elected officials not caring about regulation, protection of citizens, their human rights, their environmental rights, or any rights. Because that's what's happened in West Virginia. People there are powerless, we are poor, we are sick, and the coal industry and other industries have done this to us, and our elected officials have not protected us. And so this is where we are today, and it's not going to be any different for anybody else in America. You know,
so how are
people came, yeah.
So before we get to that, and I do definitely want to get to that because I think that's a very, very important point, but how are people getting drinking water right now? Is there a way that our listeners can help?
People are melting snow in West Virginia to bathe their children at this very moment.
Right.
We need all the water we can get from everyone to come down to West Virginia, see West Virginia. Don't, you know, if you can, tomorrow morning it's Saturday, wake up and do something epic with your life. Get your friends, get your vehicles, fill it with water, and come to West Virginia. Meet the people of West Virginia that are struggling to survive, suffering today as they have for a month, and not knowing what the future holds, if there is a future, as the coal economy declines, and now we are facing the eradication of our tourism industry, our number one revenue source, because of what industry has done to that great state.
It's a great idea, by the way. I love the idea of having people come down there because they should see for themselves and they should see what happens. And I think this is your point, but you'll correct me. I would like more people to see what happens. You know, we hear all this talk about, hey, let's deregulate and unleash the creativity of business. Something gets unleashed with the deregulation, but it isn't creativity. We saw that with the BP oil spill. We see that down in West Virginia. And as this deregulation fever continues to grip not just West Virginia and individual states anymore, but the national political scene, the risk is that we're all going to turn into this place where this kind of predation, these predators damage the economy, damage the environment, and leave people in the wreckage. Is that more or less what what folks are seeing down in West Virginia nowadays?
Absolutely. And a lot of us, including me, you know, our ancestors were the Native Americans who were driven off Georgia's land when gold was found and set upon the Trail of Tears, in which who knows how many of us died. And we ended up in reservations in Oklahoma, the ones of us that survived that Trail of Tears, in which the government gave our people tainted blankets with smallpox to kill us. So this is who we are. I mean, we are Native Americans, a lot of us. We know what's happening. We know what's going to happen to us. And if the rest of the country doesn't know what's going to happen to them, you only have to read history to find out. The water from the hollers in West Virginia feeds the streams and the rivers into your water systems in the East Coast and the Southeast. So what happens to West Virginia is going to happen to you. And we have sacrificed for every labor law in this country. We built the Industrial Revolution, and there are people in West Virginia living underneath what a third world country lives at.
And that's the thing that I think a lot of people don't realize, that there are these kinds of third world conditions here in the United States. And I think a lot of people, this is why I think your films are so important, because a lot of people don't realize that, you know, I had an ancestor myself and a branch of my family in Kentucky where there was actually forms of armed warfare over these kinds of issues. But I think part of what you're describing is a state of West Virginia in this case, where mining interests and business interests took over the political process, used it for their own ends, and have left the state devastated. And I think besides the infiltration of the groundwater and the other pollution you're describing, I think you're really describing a kind of corporate pollution too, a political pollution, aren't you?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I mean, that is at the root of it. And also in West Virginia, what you see is West Virginia was a state formed by Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War, because of our vast natural resources, to ensure and preserve the Union and end slavery. But unfortunately what happened is, in some parts of southern West Virginia, 90% of our mineral rights since the late 1800s have been owned by these out-of-state corporations. And what you see is something like $3 trillion taken out of our economy. And you go down to southern West Virginia and you ask, the coal industry says, look how good we've been for you. You go down to southern West Virginia and find any human being living down there still that would tell you that.
Well, this is a lot of information for people to absorb. It's important information. Mary Lynn Evans, where would you say that people can go to learn more about West Virginia and about the message it's sending to the rest of the nation?
The one thing I'd like to have is direct people to the Coal River Mountain Watch. It's an organization in Coal River, West Virginia. They are bringing in water, bringing in food, and it's not just the water that is the problem down there. You know, these are people that are suffering to live, and I think, you know, from a social justice aspect, these are our brothers and sisters. We understand that corporations are not people. We understand it's our brothers and sisters that protect us. After over hundreds of thousands of us dying, we understand who protects us. And that's our communities, our friends and family, not out-of-state corporations and out-of-touch politicians. So on the Facebook for Blood on the Mountain, we will be posting links for people to contribute and posting videos and information. So if people would like just to go to the Facebook for Blood on the Mountain, we can connect people with anything. They can just message me.
So number one, people can go to the Facebook page for your film, Blood on the Mountain. Number two, they can go to Coal River Mountain Watch. We had their executive director on a couple weeks ago. That's crmw.net for Coal River Mountain Watch. And most of all, I think what you're telling us is people can continue to follow this story, continue to care, continue to recognize that these are their brothers and sisters suffering, and this is their own fate, the national fate, if we don't do something about the way our political system is going. So, Mary Lynn Evans, filmmaker, spokesperson, thanks so much for being with us.
Mountaineers are always free. That's our state motto. And someday we're going to be.
Well, God bless you
Thank you so much
for
for
it.
having me on.
You bet. That was Mary Lynn Evans, who is the CEO and executive producer at Evening Star Productions, talking about the situation down in West Virginia and what it portends for the rest of the country. I'm RJ Eskow. This is the Zero Hour. We will be right back.
Education beyond high school. A path to opportunity and success for our young people. And the key to building a better life for themselves and ultimately their own children. But for many, all this is only a dream. Because the challenge of paying for education beyond high school seems to put this opportunity out of reach. But there is an organization that can help. Each year we award $80 billion in grants, low-interest loans, and work-study to students in colleges, trade schools, and professional schools. We are federal student aid, part of the U.S. Department of Education. You can learn more by logging on to federalstudentAid.ed.gov. We may be able to help you realize your dreams, so don't get left behind. After all, the most costly education is the one not begun. Federal Student Aid. Start here, go further.
Jeff, I'm home.
Hey, Mom.
So, what did you do today? I noticed the dishes are still in the sink.
I've been busy.
Getting your taxes done like we talked about?
Oh, I got my friend Dave on that. Hey, he's only charging $20.
Not Dave from your high school class who graduated 3 years late.
Yeah, he's good with numbers. Won our fantasy football league last year.
Jeff, I can't believe you would actually take your...
Kidding, Mom. I took all my paperwork over to that preparer just like you recommended.
Using a paid tax preparer this year? Visit irs.gov for some do's and don'ts. Like look for a preparer who has a preparer tax ID number and signs your return. Check out their qualifications and review your tax return before you sign it.
Oh, Jeff, why do you do this to me?
Mom, you're just so easy.
irs.gov. It's the best tax tip of all.
Hello everyone, I'm Daniel Marins, and I'm here to talk to you about Take Action News with David Schuster. Every week we talk politics, government, and what you can do to take action. David Schuster talks with today's leading political minds.
Valerie, so many people will know your name, know your story because of those dastardly actions by the Bush administration to try to discredit your husband, who called them out for their lies that led up to the Iraq War. And in so going after him, they leaked your name. 10 years since the start of the Iraq War. Has your perspective on any of this changed? Do you still carry around any sort of anger or frustration to the Bush administration? How have you been dealing with it all these years?
Until the right is able to come to terms with the reality that we were lied into this war and it was not a good idea and it wasn't to liberate the Iraqi people, they will just continue to live in, la-la land and perpetuate the lies that got us into the war in the first place.
Tune in from noon to 3 p.m. every Saturday, right here on We Act Radio.
When our daughter Ava was 4, we noticed she didn't talk much. A genetic test revealed that she had hearing loss caused by 2 mutated genes. One she inherited from myself, the other from her dad. If it weren't for the amazing people at U of M, we might have never known the true cause of Ava's hearing loss or how to properly treat it.
The University of Michigan C.S. Mott Children's Hospital is one of only a handful of hospitals in the world researching genetic hearing loss in addition to treating it. Our breakthrough research and advanced treatments combined with outstanding care help us change children's lives in extraordinary ways. For the leaders and best in pediatric care, call a Mott Patient Advisor at 877-475-MOTT or visit mottchildren.org.
She is more talkative now and more social. She loves music now. She's humming to the music, and it's sweet to actually hear her humming.
To learn more, call 877-475-MOTT.
They not only helped us find answers, they helped Ava find her voice.
That's the Michigan difference.
And we are back. I'm RJ Eskow, and this is the Zero Hour. And nowhere is the urgency of the moment, the Zero Hour, more apparent than it is in the world of the environment. So our next topic is going to be on Keystone XL and the environment. Our guest is Amanda Starbuck. Amanda is the Energy and Finance Programs Director at the Rainforest Action Network, an organization for whom I have a lot of respect and a lot of appreciation of their slogan, which is environmentalism with teeth. And Amanda and the RAN have been following this story closely. And as they wrote, the President Obama, said that he would make his final decision on Keystone XL based on its environmental impact. He commissioned a study. He promised to reject the pipeline if it, quote, would significantly exacerbate the problem of carbon pollution. And the Rainforest Action Network's blog, The Understory, wrote that the verdict in today's report is clear. Keystone XL fails President Obama's climate test, and therefore it's being said, in a sense, his decision on Keystone XL is the president's climate test. Amanda, thanks so much for being with us.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me on the show.
Well, I think that it's our pleasure, and I think it's very important for people to understand this issue because there's been some confusion even on the left about it. I mean, I think there's this sense that among some that, well, some of the unions support it. It creates jobs, and if it's not that, there's even this argument that it's not that big a deal either way. That's what's been appearing in the commentary now, that it would only create a couple thousand jobs, so it's not a big a deal to go for it. But on the same token, environmentally, if it's only creating a couple thousand jobs, how big can its environmental impact be? Could you just enlighten our listeners a little bit on that?
Sure. Well, I've been seeing reports usually put out there by the oil industry and by TransCanada, the developers, because this pipeline will be a great deal for them, saying that Keystone could create 20,000 jobs. Well, try 35. Let's be real about this. If you look at the report that the State Department brought out last week, they confirmed that there will be several thousand temporary construction jobs. Those are jobs that will last about a year, but once the pipeline is built, we are talking about 35 permanent jobs. 35 permanent jobs in an economy of 150 million people. This is hardly going to be the economic jobs lifeline that the industry is portraying it as. Compare that to the fact that there are nearly 120,000 Americans already with permanent jobs in solar energy. We definitely need to be creating jobs in the energy industry, but let's do that through clean, renewable energy rather than something that's going to be as disastrous for the climate as Keystone.
Well, of course, that's a great answer. I mean, all of a sudden we find the political forces that are telling us they don't want a jobs program in this country because they don't believe the government should create jobs. All of a sudden they want to spend billions and put the environment at risk for a handful of jobs. But the other side of it, and another report that I've seen says that the broader economic impact of the pipeline would be, and I'm curious to know if you can confirm this or not, that the broader impact of the pipeline would be to make it possible to sell oil that's currently being sold in North America elsewhere in the world, and therefore would be likely to drive up the price of oil for people in the country that's actually approving the decision, President Obama's United States. Is that correct, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'd also just like to go back to the jobs question for a minute and say that if we're talking about job creation, I honestly believe that this pipeline's got the potential to kill jobs. Do you remember a few years ago that horrific BP oil spills that absolutely devastated the Gulf fisheries? The report found, if you look at the oil industry's record between 2002 and 2012, there were 1,700 oil spills from pipelines, and TransCanada has a terrible record in this respect. So if Keystone gets built, it's fair to say it's going to spill. And a pipeline rupture is going to devastate farms and ranches along the pipeline. We should be talking about this as a job killer, not a job creator.
Well, I think that's a great point. And also, I think if oil prices do in fact go up in North America, that would have the net effect of killing jobs as well. So you could add those to that tally. But
I agree. Yes, I absolutely agree.
Now, I would also ask, could you tell our listeners just a little bit about what was in that report that was finally released?
Cool. So the report which came out last Friday, and there were a lot of people waiting to see what was in the report, and more than 2 million people had submitted comments to the State Department to inform it after the first draft, with the overwhelming majority saying that the pipeline should be rejected on climate reasons. So when the report came out, all eyes were directly on the climate section, and the killer statistic that's in the report is saying that Keystone XL could mean as much carbon pollution as up to 27 million tons of carbon pollution every single year. You can put it another way. That's like putting 6 million additional cars on our roads, or the pollution from 6 million tailpipes every year. And over the course of the lifespan of the pipeline, and each of these pipelines usually last for several decades, we're talking about 1 billion additional tons of carbon pollution. That's 1 billion additional tons at a time when most nations around the world are doing everything they can to reduce their carbon emissions. And Obama is trying to decide whether he should lock in these extra emissions. And Obama, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, of course. And now President Obama committed last June, quote, to reject the pipeline if it would, quote, significantly exacerbate the problem of carbon pollution. This report was released on Friday. Why didn't the president reject this proposal by Friday evening, and what's being done to encourage him?
Well, you're right. Why, indeed. I do think that if President Obama is serious about his climate commitment, and he even reminded us very recently in the State of the Union that he knows climate change is real. He wants to look into the eyes of his grandchildren and say he did everything he could to make a safer world. He needs to end this project, to reject this pipeline as fast as possible. To be fair to the president, he is following a process of national interest determination, and he has said he wants to follow the appropriate process. And so that means that there is now a 30-day public comment period, a 90-day period for other agencies to weigh in with any additional things that should be considered. So there is a process that needs to be followed here. But absolutely, we expect that President Obama should do the right thing by the climate, and as soon as that 90-day days are up, this needs to be rejected. And it's not just me, it's not just Rainforest Action Network. On Monday night, we saw tens of thousands of people out in the streets. There was an amazing rapid response. People in 284 cities and towns all across the country, I think 49 states and Washington, D.C., got out in the streets on Monday night and staged climate vigils to remind the president that they stand with him, and we all want to look our grandchildren in the eyes about this, and that he must have courage and stand up and rule confidently on this issue and reject the pipeline. And it's not just people attending vigils. We've seen so much opposition and outcry around this pipeline from grandparents in Houston who have been lobbying and writing letters, and people who've actually gone to the site of the construction of the southern part of the pipeline and put their bodies on the line to say, no, we do not want to see this constructed.
Well, Amanda,
doctors.
Sorry to cut in, but in the 30 seconds or so we have left, what can people do to make their voices heard on this issue in the coming 27 days or so, 25 days or so, until the president's going to make, I guess it's 23 days now, until the president makes a decision? Where can people go to get more information and perhaps get their voices heard in the 15, 20
We're
seconds
encouraging people to sign the Keystone XL Pledge of Resistance and join 76,000 others who've said that they were prepared to put their bodies on the line and engage in peaceful civil disobedience should the president signal approval. And you can find out more about that at nokxl.org. That's nokxl.org. and also at our organization's website, ran.org, ran.org.
So no NOKXL, nokxl.org, and ran.org. Did I get that right?
That's right, yes. And join the huge movement of people all across the country that are standing up and saying no to the Keystone XL pipeline.
Well, I'll be joining. I hope others will be as well. Amanda Starbuck from the Rainforest Action Network, thanks so much for being with us.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, we'll be right back. And, it just astonishes me that with the planet hanging in the balance, this is even a subject of debate. But that just shows you again, as the West Virginia story shows us, the power of corporate money and corporate influence in our national debate, in our political process, and even in our media coverage. I am R.J. Eskow, and now more than ever, this is the Zero Hour. We'll be right back after this.
Hey there, Matthew Filipovich here, host of the creatively titled Matthew Filipovich Show, which, by the way, you can hear every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio. Now, I'm going to be honest with you people, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I like talking to smart people who are smarter than me, some of the smartest, funniest, most badass progressives out there. People like Glenn Greenwald, Naomi Klein, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, Jamie Kilstein, Allison Kilkenny, Alan Grayson, Jeremy Scahill, Jim Hightower, and more. That's right, I said more. Don't believe me? Well, tune into the Matthew Filipovich Show every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. for some of the best in liberal talk, news, comedy, and interviews right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
Sorry your requested website is loading so slowly. Perhaps in the meantime you'd like to watch a Miley Cyrus video or load your New York Times article tomorrow.
I'm Baratunde Thurston from The Onion. Mother. You're listening to the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
A federal appeals court recently struck down the Federal Communications Commission's rule that, until now, has prevented Internet providers from blocking or slowing down some website content and speeding up other content. So, now, Internet providers like Verizon and Comcast can charge websites extra fees to send their content to us at a faster speed. And the law no longer prevents those providers from blocking content that they don't like. In short, the Internet may quickly be for sale to the highest bidder. Now, the FCC could fix all this by reclassifying broadband Internet access as a telecommunications service. That would keep the Internet open to all and protect net neutrality. Unfortunately, the history of the FCC is to buckle to corporate lobbying. There is, however, hope. There is a grassroots movement calling on the FCC to do its job and preserve the openness of the Internet. So, would you take a minute to help preserve freedom of the Internet by going to the ACLU or Free Press website and signing that petition? People who believe in free speech and free inquiry now and in the future will be in your debt.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
Packers.
Vikings. We come from different places.
Uptown.
Downtown. We come to different conclusions.
Half empty.
Half full. But when we live united, we make a real difference in the building blocks of life. Children succeed in school, families gain financial stability, the health of our neighbors improves, and suddenly so do our communities. Real change won't happen without you.
Live united.
So give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Sign up today at liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. The National Labor Relations Board proposed a new rule this week that would shorten the process for union organizing elections. AFL-CIO President Rich Trumka says it's a step in the right direction. Teamsters President Jim Hoffa says his union supports the new rules. Hoffa says it will help stop companies from abusing the legal process to stall elections and delay the union organizing that workers want. The proposed rule change would require businesses to provide email addresses and phone numbers of employees to give unions fair access to the workers in an election. A similar rule was proposed 2 years ago, and business groups challenged it in court. And LRB Chairman Mark Pierce says the new rule will speed up union organizing elections, getting rid of delays and inefficiencies that hurt both workers and employers. At the United Auto Workers Legislative Conference in Washington this week, Vice President Joe Biden told UAW delegates that right-wing forces are waging long-term, intense, concentrated war on the House of Labor. Biden said unions like the UAW are the only ones keeping the barbarians from the gates. Biden says the right to collective bargaining itself is being attacked, and if unions vanish, Biden said, the middle class evaporates. Biden was hailed by UAW President Bob King as a strong and steadfast friend of the UAW.
I still know how to pronounce the word union. Union. One of our problems is not enough elected officials remember how to pronounce the word union. Everybody talks about workers. I talk about unions. Every other worker, white collar and blue collar, not a union member, has figured out the reason they had benefits in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s was because of organized labor.
Roughly 600 workers at 5 nursing homes in Connecticut operated by HealthBridge have had pay cuts imposed on them by bankruptcy courts. The cuts will average about $30 a week. HealthBridge runs 5 union nursing homes and 3 non-union nursing homes in Connecticut. In 2012, worker pensions were eliminated and their health care costs were increased. SEIU Local 1199 is fighting to protect the livelihoods of the workers, and HealthBridge is accused under federal law of alleged union busting.
Fear, intimidation, even racism is part of that plant every day, and we go through a lot of that. Put fear on the workers, we can control them, but they don't never give us a fair chance to say, why we need a union. We need a voice at this plant, and the intimidation and the fear, it really needs to stop.
Keep these worker and union voices on the air by supporting Workers Independent News. Donate now at laborradio.org. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Samantha Wyatt. In a Change.org petition, high school student Jewel Moore asked Disney to consider a plus-size princess character, saying it would help girls who feel ugly for not fitting the skinny standard. Fox and Friends invited Emmy, a plus-size supermodel, and Mimi Roth, a self-described obesity expert, on to discuss the petition.
Beauty within our children's movie and entertainment industry is askew to the thinner side.
Oh, please. Katniss is fit, Mulan was fit, Pocahontas was fit.
Those are a few. Pocahontas, there's a few representations outside of.
So you want them to be plus size? You want them to be overweight? This sounds like mob mentality.
No,
I'm not missing any plus size.
What I'm saying.
It's unhealthy. If you like cancer and diabetes, if you want fertility problems, then plus size is beautiful.
It is important to note that plus size does not mean obese. Plus Model magazine reports that plus size models are on average between the sizes of 6 and 14. For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
American citizens everywhere are demanding and supporting speedy and complete action.
Broadcasting from the We Act Radio studios in Washington, D.C., heard live across the nation, this is Take Action News with Carl Frisch.
Many of the world's great movements of thought and action have flowed from the work of a single man.
There is work to be done. The state of our economy calls for action, bold and swift, and we will act.
We will take action when action is required.
And we are back. I'm RJ Eskow, and this is the program formerly known as Take Action News, which from this moment forward shall be known as the 0 Hour. This is the 0 Hour. And I thought in the opening commentary for this hour, just reflect a little bit on the West Virginia segment and the Rainforest Action Network segment on the Keystone XL pipeline, and tie that into our name. This whole notion that we're approaching the 0 Hour. It astonishes me the passivity with which so far so much of the public and so much of the media has accepted the ongoing destruction of our planet. And part of it has been this ability to confuse people about climate change and so on. But, what I've thought about a lot is, first of all, every segment that I do, every monologue or every interview we have gets a name. And usually our fantastic crew, either our executive producer, Pete Callahan, or our master of ceremonies, Troy Miller, comes up with a great name. And let's give a big shout out to them now. They come up with a great name for each segment, and they'll probably come up with a better one for this monologue. But, I guess if I were naming it, I might call it, what if they gave an alien invasion and nobody came? Because back when I was a kid, Paul Krugman, who's about my age, has written about this too. Back when we were kids, the TV show The Outer Limits had an episode called Architects of Fear. And the whole premise of the episode was this: the world was divided by wars and the Cold War and racial divisions and divisions between rich and poor and left and right and young and old and so on. And that some people got together in secret and decided that the ideal way to unite humanity peacefully was by creating the threat of an alien invasion. So that was the whole premise of this show. And Robert Culp, who went on to become a popular actor, played an astronaut who was biologically altered to become a big, horrible, scary alien, and then they sent him out into deep space, and he came back in and landed and came out and threatened the world, etc., etc. A very sentimental story where his wife recognizes him as he's dying, etc. But here's the thing. The whole world came together, as everybody assumed it would. There were millions of science fiction movies back then. Well, not millions, I exaggerate. Let's leave the exaggeration to the other side. But there were dozens of science fiction movies with the premise that everybody gets together once the flying saucers appear and humanity is threatened. But here's the thing. We now have an existential threat to our planet. It's not alien invasion. It's corporate invasion. It's polluter invasion. But it is a major threat. They're saying that, in a few decades, 100 million people or more will be displaced by coastline flooding, on and on and on. There'll be mass increase in deaths. There'll be increase in disease. We're altering the chemistry, the balance of our planet, and perhaps in even more destructive ways than we realize. So now, I've thought about writing a movie script where the architects of fear come back and try to unite humanity again with another existential threat, aliens or whatever, but nobody cares because right-wingers go on TV and say the aliens aren't real, and corporate people go on and say the aliens won't have a big effect on the economy, and other corporate interests do trade deals with the aliens or offer to be their public relations agents or get them on NPR or book them on The Tonight Show or whatever. I mean, it's just, that's how absurd our current situation is right now. I mean, look at West Virginia. Look at what's happening to West Virginia. Speak about aliens. Think about aliens for a second. In the movie Independence Day, the whole premise was that these aliens came in, devastated the planet, killed everybody on it, drew its raw materials out of the ground so that it was just gaping craters everywhere, and then their giant spaceships moved on to the next planet to do the same. Take a look at some of the mountaintop mining in West Virginia and some of the other coal-producing states. It will look to you. Go down there. Do what Mary Lynn Evans suggested. Get in your car and go down there if you're within driving distance. Bring some water and take a look around, because the environmental destruction you see there will look as if the spaceships from Independence Day had come through and just devastated certain areas. The kind of strip mining is a devastating act, and yet we did nothing to stop it. Now, imagine a planet that's equally devastated, where climate is destabilized, where it's overheated, where there are terrible storms, where there's widespread poverty, where the low-lying coastlines of India, of Bangladesh, of many of the island and other third world nations, but New York City, Los Angeles, and so on, are harmed by rising floodwaters, where 100 million refugees are displaced on this planet that we know and love. Think about the fact that this is coming, and there's an extraordinary level of disinterest. And it's actually, we're told that it's a matter of debate whether climate change is real or not. No, it isn't. It's scientifically accepted fact. Why are we still talking about this? And that includes extra cold weather as well as extra hot weather. That's why it's no longer called global warming, because that leads people to believe that unusual storms or cold spells are not also part of the process. So stick with us hour, because faith, or the misapplication of faith, is another area of concern that we have to deal with here. So we're going to be talking with a terrific writer about what he thinks is wrong with the new atheism, and also what's wrong with the debate that was recently held about climate change. I tend to agree with him on that. We'll be talking about other issues of national perception. Excuse me, I'm told we had a slight technical problem, which I think we've addressed, having to do with our video feed. But unless you're watching on the YouTube channel, which, by the way, you really should, right now it can be found at Take Action News as a YouTube search, but it may also be found as the 0 Hour. We'll be keeping you posted on that. But in the meantime, I want to reassure you that our loss of video was not the result of alien tampering with our broadcasting machinery, nor was it the result of corporate tampering, as far as I know. But please stick with us here on the 0 Hour, or as it's been formerly known, Take Action News. We intend to bring you everything you need to know to make decisions based on the urgency of our economic climate and political realities. So please stick with us. I am R.J. Eskow, and this is the 0 Hour.
Sergeant Michelle Garcia served meritoriously in Iraq and has the medals to prove it. Soon after leaving the Navy, Lieutenant Chris Scott found a job, a home, and started a family of his own. Corpsman Richard Stokely took the skills he learned in Vietnam and put them to good use as a paramedic. But soon after leaving the military, each of these veterans fell on hard times and faced homelessness. Even after Michelle lost all her savings, even after Chris wasn't able to pay his mortgage, and even after Richard battled alcoholism for years, they each reached out for help when they needed it most. A simple phone call put them in touch with a trained professional from the Department of Veterans Affairs. That call got Michelle a place to stay until she could afford one of her own, put Chris in touch with employment assistance, and found Richard a substance abuse program. These veterans are success stories not only for how they were able to help others while serving their country, but for how they were able to let others help them. If you know of or are a veteran in need, make the call.
When you go on a road trip, you're careful. You follow the signs to arrive at the right place. It's the same online. Read the internet signs along the way, or you may be led astray. For example, look for the .gov at the end of the web address. If it isn't .gov, it isn't the real Social Security website. People are often victimized by misleading advertisers who use terms like Social Security or Medicare to trick the public. These companies charge a fee for free Social Security services. These services include changing your name and getting a new Social Security card. There's no need to pay for services Social Security offers for free. Go to www.socialsecurity.gov. And remember, if it isn't .gov, it isn't Social Security.
Would you like to secure stable employment, affordable, high-quality child care, or an opportunity to serve your community through meaningful volunteer and internship experiences? If so, UPO is the place for you. Hello, I'm Andrea Thomas, Vice President of Administration and Chief of Staff for UPO. As the Community Action Agency for Washington, D.C., UPO has proudly served the residents of Washington for the past 50 years. Annually, we impact the lives of nearly 100,000 Washingtonians, 100,000 people advancing their education, securing employment, maintaining housing stability, and investing in their communities through volunteerism. Our vision is a Washington of thriving communities and self-sufficient residents. To learn more about our services and how you can partner with us or donate, visit us at www.upo.org. UPO, where we are uniting people with opportunities.
Take Action News is proud to be sponsored by Healthcare for America Now.
HCAN is a national coalition of more than 1,000 groups in 50 states, representing 30 million people. HCAN works to promote, defend, implement, and improve the Affordable Care Act at both the state and federal levels. They also try to protect Medicare and Medicaid, increase corporate accountability, and confront forces that seek to take away critical services. HCAN believes in creating jobs, not cutting programs people depend on. HCAN runs comprehensive issue campaigns that mobilize people at the grassroots and define the public debate. HCAN is fighting to protect, implement, and improve the new health care law through national and state-based legislative and regulatory campaigns built on grassroots action, public education, communications, policy analysis, and groundbreaking research. HCAN has become a respected voice and national leader on health care while continuing to focus on aggressive field activity. Support HCAN, Healthcare for America Now.
And we are back on Take Action News. I'm going to have to reprogram myself because we have a new name. This is the 0 Hour now. And I am still, however, RJ Eskow. I'm not going to change my name yet. And our next guest, I've been looking forward to talking with him because I've followed his writing for a while, and I really appreciate what he has to say, particularly because Sean McElwee, who is contributing writer for Salon and also has written for Policy Shop, The Atlantic, and Rolling Stone, among others, has been willing to take on some of the tenets of New Atheism. I wrote about that field, wrote about the New Atheists somewhat in 2006 or so, and I was to adopt a phrase from the post-World War II left. I was prematurely anti-New Atheist because people weren't ready yet. I felt that there were some sort of cultural beliefs that the Dawkins Hitchin crowd held, and Sean has been doing a terrific job covering that, and he's also covered the recent debate between a creationist, Ken Ham, and Bill Nye, who is known as Bill Nye the Science Guy, the science educator. And Sean wrote, Sean, are you with us, first of all?
Absolutely. In fact, I just finished up your piece on Alternet today on libertarians who made their fortunes off the government.
Well, good. Speaking of faith-based ideologies, I guess, that's the through. It's great to have you with us, and I really appreciated your series on your two pieces on Ken Ham, the creationist, and the debate with Bill Nye. And you wrote that it was a mistake, that it was a big mistake to debate creationists, and you wrote, and it very well said that. The religious right's stance on climate change, economics, and evolution is not informed by their religious beliefs. Rather, these political and economic views are imposed on Scripture, which is often read without theological rigor. Boy, that's for sure. So, so thanks so much, first of all, for being with us.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And what did you think of that? What did you think of that debate? I know before the fact you felt it was a mistake because you were really seeing a science-based guy debating someone who has a strong political ideology and basically is using, I don't want to paraphrase you incorrectly, but basically using his using his Bible to justify his political beliefs rather than, deriving it from that Bible. What did you think of the debate?
I mean, first off, it is very, very frustrating, I think, for most Christians that every time there's a debate like this, Christianity is represented by its most extreme factions, right? When Christopher Hitchens did that series of debates with, this fundamentalist preacher, and you're like, this isn't what religion's all about. So when scientists say, oh, we don't think that Bill Nye can represent us because he doesn't have a PhD in science, I say, I don't think Ken Ham represents Christianity because he has this biblical literalism, which is not at all informed by the traditions of religion at all. It's a radically new innovation. As to the debate, I think one of the things that was talked about, and it should have been talked about more, is the fact that Ken Ham's ministry is losing money rapidly. They're hemorrhaging cash. And this is going to bring a lot of money for them. And when these kids go into the Creationist Museum, Bill Nye is not going to be there to offer a corrective. So, yeah, right. I mean, we got both sides of the story here, but when kids are brought by their parents to the Creation Museum, there's not going to be Bill Nye sitting there. So I thought the debate was a bad idea on Nye's part.
Well, and here's one of the things that I got in. First of all, I got viciously attacked by members of the New Atheist community. I don't know if you've experienced that yet, but I don't know if that's still part of the debate. But one of the things that I said, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, this is me, not you, but I'd be curious in your thoughts, is that I feel there is a certain mirror image and as well as a mutual interest when you have someone as particularly like Hitchens. I've always kind of liked Bill Nye a little more than that, but when you have somebody, you have two interests here, Ken Ham and then the New Atheists, both of whom's arguments are served by characterizing religion as a rigid set of ideological, fundamentalist, political beliefs, because for the New Atheists it becomes easy to mock them, and for the Ken Hams of the world it elevates them in importance. So I thought there was a kind of mirroring going on in this debate, just as there was a mirroring in Hitchens' mischaracterization of religion and his picking out of these minor figures to debate, which elevated them. Is that? Do you think there's any credibility to my interpretation?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, first off, it was Douglas Wilson who Hitchens debated that I was referencing, and he's a fundamentalist preacher who believed that slavery was, for the most part, a benign institution. So not at all within mainstream Christianity, and this is the person that he chooses to debate. But you're absolutely right. I think in many instances, people are. But look at the way that Dawkins and Hitchens talk about the Middle East and Muslims. Their goal here is to obfuscate the geopolitical realities that are causing this conflict and make it all about religion. And it makes it a lot easier to talk about these countries if you're just like, oh, it's these crazy religious people, instead of what's really going on, which is these underlying. And this is the goal with all of the pieces that I'm writing, is let's look at the underlying economic and political conflicts here. Because when we're talking about the Ken Ham debate, Ken Ham isn't really that worried about evolution. What he's worried about doing is defending biblical literalism, because biblical literalism is the way that you weaponize Christianity. Biblical literalism is the way that you keep women out of the churches. It's the way that you keep gay marriage illegal. It's the way that you fight against abortion rights. It all comes from biblical literalism. That's what he's trying to defend right here. And I don't know if Nye necessarily went in totally understanding the very political motivations for not just Ken Ham, but if you look at the Discovery Institute, it's the same thing.
Well, I think that Nye, because I think he's a person of goodwill, I think he also didn't understand how much he was fortifying the argument of a Ken Ham, the stature of a Ken Ham, and and there's another, but there's a flip side of this too, which is you've made this point as well, that there are, and you made it just now, that there are underlying forces, for example, in Middle East violence that people blame on religion. People always say, well, look at what religion's done. It's got Jews and Muslims fighting in the Middle East. But the fact is, for example, that Robert Pape, I know you're familiar with Robert Pape, his study of terrorism in Palestine found that it was pretty much evenly divided historically between Muslim terrorists, Christian terrorists, and non-sectarian, one might even say non-believer terrorists, members of Al-Fatah, which was never a religiously based organization. So it seems that in many cases religion is used as the flag, but is not the source of the conflict. And if that's true, isn't Bill Nye unconsciously helping somebody raise a flag that he would rather see taken down?
And absolutely, and I think the idea, the idea that I've heard pretty widely is, you don't win by not confronting creationists. Well, let's be honest. The science on this has been closed for about probably at least a century now, where we've known evolution is from. And if creationists still exist, I don't think Bill Nye debating them is going to solve the problem. Just like I don't think that you're going to convince people of lots of the other crazy things that they believe. The best thing to do, quite frankly, I think, is to teach evolution in the schools, and to not make it seem like this is a legitimate debate that we still need to be having. Because if you want to debate every wacko bird, there are still people out there who believe, in the flat Earth theory, and I really do think that is just as absurd as denying evolution and denying climate change. The science is out.
I see we're in agreement on this. I've got to ask you this question. I've been debating with myself about it, but I got to ask you: do you get hate mail from new atheists?
Here's a funny one I got. In the piece, I compared the 9/11 movement to the creationist movement because I see a lot of parallels in the immunity to evidence, right? In this world that it was once complex is made incredibly simple, which is the basis of all quackery. And I got a few 9/11 conspiracy theorists who said, "Hey, don't lump us in with those crazy creationists." So,
well,
you
well,
get weird stuff.
Well, what was fascinating to me was, Richard Dawkins has a chapter in the God Illusion about the hate mail he's received. When I was writing about the new atheists used to write me very similar hate mail, including graphic descriptions of the sexual acts that they believed I was fantasizing I wanted to perform with Jesus. So I mean, it is a heated subject for everyone on every side of it, but I think that last question for you on this topic. Do you think that I'm actually trying to figure out how to best target this? Do you think that there's a way out of this polarization in the debate? In other words, I don't believe, for example, that the more extreme new atheists represent most non-believers in this country in their attitude towards Muslims or whatever, and I don't believe that Ken Ham and his ilk represent more than a tiny fraction of religionists of any religion in this country. You see a way out of that in the future? Is there anybody advocating for a more reasonable kind of dialogue?
And absolutely, I see a solution, and it's one of the things I've noted in every article I've written on this is the non-overlapping magisterium. This is something that it's Catholic doctrine now, and Stephen Jay Gould has been a proponent of it, which is we need both science and religion, and I don't see.
Well, I'm up against a hard stop on this, and I probably should have warned you of that, but. Yeah. I'm going to direct people to your writing. It's Sean McElwee, McElwee, and the non-overlapping magisteria. Thanks so much for being with us, Sean.
Absolutely. It was great to talk to you, Richard.
You bet. Same here. We'll have you back. This is RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero Hour.
You're listening to WIAT Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
Breast health awareness is critical for all women, particularly African Americans, because we have an increased risk of dying from breast cancer compared to women of other backgrounds. At U of M, I'm doing research here and with women in Ghana to look for an inherited link that makes African and African American women susceptible to a more aggressive type of cancer. Finding this link, I believe, will make new treatments possible. But right now, making sure that you are properly screened is our best protection.
With experts like Dr. Lisa Newman, the University of Michigan Health System is a leader in cancer care. When you call our free Cancer Answer line at 800-865-1125, an oncology nurse will answer any questions you might have about the prevention, screening, and treatment of breast cancer and other forms of cancer. All calls are confidential. Call 800-865-1125 or visit uofmhealth.org/canceranswerline.
We're working to help everyone enjoy longer, healthier lives.
That's the Michigan difference.
As a National Guard or Reserve member, you served your country. Now let VA serve you.
I wouldn't be here today as a successful woman without the help that I received.
Your VA honors your service by providing a wide range of veterans benefits. From home loans to job training, VA benefits can help with some of life's toughest challenges.
What's important about VA benefits is they don't just touch you as an individual. They can touch your parents, maybe your grandparents, your child.
Go to benefits.va.gov/Guard Reserve to learn more, including how to apply online using e-benefits.
I just finished a master's degree recently, and now I'm working on another degree as well. So the military made that all possible. My veterans benefits made that all possible.
No matter what the time is, apply for your benefits. You earn them. VA is ready to help you.
Achieve your next mission. Learn about and apply for your VA benefits today.
Hey, I'm Anderson Cooper. As a parent, you want to make sure that your child knows how to deal with bullying when they see it happening. And chances are they want to help, but they don't really know how. Well, teach them that the best thing to do is calmly walk away, find a teacher or other adult, and speak up. And do your part. Be that adult they can talk to and trust will listen. Join me to help stop bullying. Go to stopbullying.gov to find out more.
The true definition of hero. And being a hero took a heroic effort.
Every day we bring to our fans the world of sports. We speak of heroes and heroism, but there are days when sports matter little and heroes matter more. These heroes don't hit walk-off homers or buzzer-beating threes. They simply made a plan for what to do when disaster strikes. You never know when you might need to be the hero, because you never know if today is the day before a natural disaster. Prepare, plan, be a hero. Visit ready.gov.
Hey there, Matthew Filipovich here, host of the creatively titled Matthew Filipovich Show, which, by the way, you can hear every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio. Now, I'm going to be honest with you people, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I like talking to smart people who are smarter than me, some of the smartest, funniest, most badass progressives out there. People like Glenn Greenwald, Naomi Klein, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, Jamie Kilstein, Allison Kilkenny, Alan Grayson, Jeremy Scahill, Jim Hightower, and more. That's right, I said more. Don't believe me? Well, tune in to the Matthew Filipovich Show every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. for some of the best in liberal talk, news, comedy, and interviews right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio.
And we are back on the 0 hour. This is RJ Eskow, and this segment is going to be about the planet, but not our planet, other potential planets, and the concept of what our next guest describes as super habitable worlds. Our guest is John Armstrong, who is associate professor at Weber State University and has just authored a paper on the concept of super habitable worlds and the possibility that one might be, at least in astronomic terms, quite close to us. Professor Armstrong, thanks so much for being with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, you bet. Now, listen, you got to watch me, because I'm likely to try to lead you into irresponsible speculation about which you don't have scientific data. So just tell me to stop if I do that. But your paper introduces the concept of super habitable worlds, the paper that you co-authored, and the possibility that one might be in the star system that's closest to our own, which is Alpha Centauri b. Just very briefly, and for a lay audience, could you tell us what you're describing?
Sure. So the best thing I can do is give you an analogy. You know, I live in the deserts of Ogden, Utah, and clearly we have life here in Ogden, Utah, but I've also visited the rainforests of the Amazon, which also has life. And I think you could argue that the Amazon has a much more larger diversity and lushness of life than the deserts of Ogden, Utah. So what Renee Heller and I did for our paper was to kind of extend that logic to planets like our Earth, and imagine the case that maybe the Earth isn't the best place for life in the galaxy. Maybe we're a small little rocky world with just barely enough water to hold on to the biosphere that we have, and that there might be places out there in the galaxy that have conditions that are more conducive to life than what we would find on the Earth.
So that was the premise for your study, and the significance of that, I think, just for our audience to be clear, is not necessarily that this might mean we can find planets that are even better places for human beings to live because the gravity might be higher or whatever, but that if we're talking about the possibility of life forming on more than one planet, possibility of extraterrestrial life, there may be planets, I believe, if I understand correctly, that are even more likely to host life than our own.
That's right. And you mentioned Alpha Centauri b, which is the nearest star system to ours. Now, we have no evidence of an Earth-like planet around that star system, but if you think about it, the Alpha Centauri star system has two sun-like stars that orbit one another. Those two sun-like stars could very easily have habitable worlds that orbit them, and if that's the case, then you could have a system that's very compact. You know, the stars are close to each other the way planets in our solar system are close to each other, and you could have multiple planets that could have evolved life. And you can imagine what our space program would look like if there happened to be a habitable world that's the equivalent of the distance away from us is the planet Neptune. I'm pretty sure we'd probably already be on board that some ship to go out there and visit a world like that.
Right.
Yeah, so I think there's just there's this idea that there are systems out there, and we're finding planets. There's a type of planet out in the galaxy, a very common type of planet called a super Earth, which is about twice the size of the Earth, and we don't have one of these in our solar system. And they're very common in the galaxy, and we have no idea what their properties are. So I think to call the Earth the best place for life ignores some of the data that we're finding about other worlds.
Right. It also means you haven't been to southern New Jersey. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. But I lived in New Jersey. I'm going to get a lot of flack for that. But also, I think that this whole discussion of the potential for extraterrestrial life seems to have shifted. I mean, I remember when I was in college, people were, first there was Drake's theorem and the idea that there were all sorts of habitable planets out there. Then it seems to me, as a non-astronomer, then it was kind of, well, we're not really finding anything, forget it. And then all of a sudden, I have this app for my iPhone, Exoplanet, which is supposed to identify and track new discoveries of potential habitable planets. It's sending me push messages all the time. So there are hundreds and hundreds of planets being discovered, even with our limited resources. Are people thinking now that extraterrestrial life is more likely than perhaps we thought a couple decades ago?
Well, certainly, the way you mentioned Drake's equation, where you sort of step through all the properties that you need to get a planet with life. And one of the properties in Drake's equation is how many stars out there have Earth-like planets that are capable of being inhabited. And that number is now a known number. We have measured the number of planets that happen to orbit stars that might be conducive for life. Now, if you extrapolate that to the entire galaxy, you're talking billions of planets. The thing that's changed from back 20 years ago to now is that we have data from star systems telling us that at least planets like ours are not rare, and there are these other types of planets that we never even knew existed. So yeah, I think the thing has changed. The game has changed a little bit. I think most of us in the field feel that we are within a decade of measuring the presence of life on another world.
And just so that our listeners are clear, when you say measuring, you mean that there might be some sort of reading from perhaps radio telescope or something that indicates organic material, not intelligent life.
Right. Well, and what I'm talking about specifically is the fingerprint in the atmosphere of the planet that tells you that life is interacting with the atmosphere of the planet. So yeah, we're talking about finding the evidence of, say, photosynthesis, or evidence of organisms that produce gases in the atmosphere like we do on the Earth. As far as finding intelligent life, that frankly that could happen tomorrow if we point a radio telescope at the right star and get a signal of somebody's old TV programs. We might know that tomorrow.
Right. Well, one of the big discussions that we do have, obviously, the search for SETI and other initiatives, search for extraterrestrial intelligence, listening at least somewhat for broadcasts from outer space, as most science fiction fans know. But one of the big debates used to be, well, why haven't we heard anything? If life is this common, there should be broadcasts floating around, or signals, intelligible signals. We've got nothing. And before the field started shifting again, I had the sense people were starting to think, well, maybe that's kind of proof there's nobody out there.
Yeah, I saw a talk by some folks at the SETI Institute in California about this very topic, and if you think about what area of the galaxy we've searched for signals, it's an incredibly small amount. I mean, imagine an enormous plate of spaghetti and this little teeny tiny meatball. The meatball is what we've searched, and I think the prediction that some folks out of SETI gave is that by 2060 we will have, if you just extrapolate our computing power and our telescopes and our ability to observe things, that by 2060 we should have found signals from life on other planets, or we'll be able to put very, very hard limits on how rare they are. So we've got a long ways to go. We've just been looking, we've just thought about looking, had the technology to look for the last 50 years. We've only been seriously looking for the last 30, and now we've only just ramped up some really amazing searches in the last 10. I think it's been we still have a ways to go.
And if you were to be right, and there was a super habitable planet in Alpha Centauri b, 4 light years away, and there's intelligent life there, they've gotten every single radio and television broadcast up to the year 2009, so I don't blame them for not getting in touch.
Exactly.
So, John Armstrong, Associate Professor at Weber State University, thanks so much. I hope you'll come back and talk to us again sometime. It's a fascinating area and, of course, important for humanity's destiny.
All right, my pleasure. Thank you so much for the time.
You bet. All right, well, we're messing up our own planet. It may be that there are habitable planets elsewhere, but bear in mind, I did a little research, and even if there were a super habitable planet at the closest star system, Alpha Centauri b, it would take the space shuttle 265,000 years to get there. And I don't know about you, but I don't have that kind of time. So if we want to save our planet, there's still no reason to do anything but set the fire alarm, make sure we set our planet. That mission is urgent. This is the 0 Hour, and I'm RJ Eskow, and we'll be back after these messages.
For me, guns are for hunting and protecting my family. I believe in the Second Amendment, and I'll fight to protect it. But with rights come responsibilities. That's why I support comprehensive background checks, so criminals and the dangerously mentally ill can't buy guns. That protects my rights and my family.
Tell Congress, don't protect criminals. Vote to protect gun rights and our families with comprehensive background checks. Demand action now.
Hello, everybody. I'm David Schuster, your host of Take Action News. On our show, we talk government, politics, and what you can do to have an impact. We're nonpartisan, report like hell, and let the chips fall where they may. We feature segments like social media, activists of the week, and the latest news affecting our communities. So join us every Saturday and make a difference. Yes, you and I, we can do this. That's Take Action News on the air, online, and at your podcast convenience on iTunes each week on the We Act Radio Network.
Say you want to go to college.
Yay!
A Big Ten college. But you don't want to feel like part of the, well, you know. Is there an answer for you? Of course. Indiana University East.
Go Red Wolves!
Indiana University East. You'll get the quality of a Big Ten education in a small college setting. IU East offers more than 50 fields of study, from accounting to political science, taught by internationally recognized faculty with an average of 18 students per class. So it's not, student number 95A-6273, please report to. It's more like, hey, John, welcome to class. Best of all, you'll graduate with one of the most respected degrees anywhere, a degree from IU. Don't wait. Go to iue.edu. or call 800-959-EAST to arrange a visit to Indiana University East. IU. Focused on you.
We Act Radio is a very proud partner of the Start at Westminster, a harm reduction, prevention, and awareness initiative sponsored by the Westminster Presbyterian Church right here in D.C. START stands for Syringe, Treatment, Advocacy, Resources, Training. These are the core elements of the harm reduction philosophy at START. The goal of this program is to reduce transmissions of HIV, hepatitis, and other bloodborne infectious diseases by empowering those at risk of infection with the tools, resources, and referrals they need to take charge of their health. Over the past year, the Start at Westminster tested over 1,600 people, and they're averaging about 150 tests each month. And of course, with the proper funding, that number could go even higher. For more information on this terrific program, go to www.startatwestminster.org. or visit the Westminster Presbyterian Church, 400 I Street Southwest, right here in Washington, D.C.
100
100% success rate in modifying their home. Free consultation at 10%.
Does this sound familiar? If you're in need of assistance with your mortgage, be careful where you turn for help. Loan modification scammers will offer deals too good to be true. Learn the signs so your life won't be turned upside down. Know it, avoid it, report it. For more information or to report a scam, call 1-888-9950 or visit HUD.gov/prevent-loan-scams.
Our children are exposed to violence every day, in their neighborhoods, in their schools, even in their own homes. Exposure to violence can have a devastating and lifelong impact. Through community action and leadership at the national level, we're identifying the children who need our help. I'm Attorney General Eric Holder, and I'm asking those of you who have a role in a child's life to take action. Through your attention and early intervention, we can help children in need to heal, to thrive. Together, we can change their lives and their futures.
Join the Justice Department in defending childhood.
I'm RJ Eskow, and this is the Zero Hour. We'll be back. And I'll tell you, it's the 0 hour when it comes to saving our political system from money, and that's why we have our next guest on, Ryan Clayton. Ryan is I guess his title is Executive Director of Wolf PAC, which is a super PAC founded by my good friend and fellow troublemaker Cenk Uygur. And Cenk didn't like my name, so Wolfpack is such a cool name. I think I wanted to call it the Six Pack or the Flip Top Menthol Pack, or I don't know, but Wolfpack is a great name. It's a great organization, and it's dedicated to getting money out of politics. And I really am glad to have Ryan on talking about recent initiative to promote the subject, but just to talk about money in general. Ryan, thanks for coming on.
For sure. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Say hi to Cenk for me.
Definitely will.
Tell him I hope he's staying out of trouble.
We're pretty good at getting into trouble, but doing
I
good
know.
things
Well,
with it.
that's the mission statement nowadays, I think. Now you came up in political advertising business, and you watch the growth of these independent groups and the way they're hijacking our political system so that you can't even get, whether it's gun legislation passed after Sandy Hook or climate control legislation, even as we pollute the economy, on and on. We could go on and on with this, but you see how it's affecting the trade talks and everything else. But specifically, I guess, we had Larry Lessig, Professor Lawrence Lessig, on a couple weeks ago talking about his march across New Hampshire, and he's doing that as another way to try to publicize the cost of the corrupting influence of money in politics. Did you follow that? How's that going? Is that having an impact?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we went up there to New Hampshire to march with Larry Lessig. I went up on the anniversary of the passing away of Aaron Swartz, which is at the beginning of the march. And then Cenk went there pretty close to the end of the march, which was the anniversary of the birth of Granny D, who's a famous campaign finance reformer who actually walked across the country. And we went up there, walked sometimes 20 miles a day, sometimes in the rain, sometimes in the snow, and just talked to local New Hampshire voters and got them all to promise that if a presidential candidate came up to them in a few years, that the first question they'd ask would be, what are you going to do about the corruption in Washington, D.C.? We've all got our issues, right? I care a lot about education and the environment and labor rights and things like that, but we're not really going to get good public policy on those issues until we get free and fair elections once again in this country.
Well, is this the number one political issue facing us today? To quote my good friend Cenk, of course. How was that? Did I sound like him?
That was awesome.
That was awesome. So,
Yeah.
so of course, we know this is the top issue. We know this is corrupting every process, every form of change we want to make. So this is the issue, and I'm so glad you guys are talking about this. But are these guys, did you get voters in New Hampshire willing to say to you, for example, look, everybody talks about Dixville Notch and how New Hampshire sets the tone for the primaries. Democratic primary looks like a walk in the park for Hillary Clinton. But let me throw a curveball at you. Nobody I've talked to remembers this. Maybe you do, Ryan, because you follow this issue. But back in the desperation days when Hillary's campaign against Obama was tanking and all was lost, her last desperation play was, she said, I am going to make meaningful campaign reform and public financing of elections the cornerstone of my presidency. This was a last-minute bid for the progressive vote. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I don't remember her saying that. I remember her really pulling up in the polls in New Hampshire and doing a little better there. But I don't think any movement happens on the calendar of an election. I think there's a great movie out called The Square, which is about the revolution in Egypt and Tahrir Square, and he talks about how the streets are our ballot boxes, right? And I think somewhere in between elections and the streets, there's this new idea of citizenship and engaging with the people that are in elected office right now, and that's what we do at Wolfpack. We actually encourage citizens to get out there and contact their state legislators, because state legislators actually listen. They're not like the scumbags in Washington and all these congressmen and women who go on the television. They're actually, just local people down the street. They're teachers and they're firefighters and they're nurses and doctors and lawyers and small businessmen. They're just regular everyday people. So when you call them, they actually call you back and they'll listen. And, we've been talking to a lot of them all across the country about passing resolutions to call a convention and propose an amendment for free and fair elections. And what we found out was, looking back through the history, is that's actually how most amendments to the Constitution come about. You start at the state level, you get a bunch of state legislators who are just regular everyday people, all hot and bothered about amending the Constitution, and they start passing these calls, and eventually you get the amendment you want. Now, normally that gets proposed by Congress, but really the way it starts is it starts at the state level. With the 17th Amendment, they got within one or two states of calling for a convention where the states could just propose the amendment themselves, and Congress said, "Oh, okay, we'll just give you the amendment that you're calling for." So, that's what we've been really focused on doing, not necessarily in elections. Look, I'm a hardcore voter. I'm always going to vote, but that's not the end of your duty as a citizen. What you really need to do is get engaged with, actively contacting your politicians. The right wing's been doing it for years and years and years. It's time for the left to catch up on that front and start contacting and actually being active citizens and being involved in the political process and making sure that we can get an amendment to the Constitution. Because if you look at most amendments, they're progressive stuff, giving women the right to vote, ending slavery, making sure everybody can buy some booze and have a good time, and pretty soon there's probably going to be an amendment to make sure everybody can smoke whatever the hell they want to.
Well, that's happening on the state level too, as you know, and I guess look, I'm totally with you. You get that. I mean, I couldn't agree more on every count of everything you said, including the specifics of the issue and the need for the left and the obligation for all of us to get out in the streets. But there's a cynical voice that you hear all the time that just says, well, and particularly among Democrats, and this drives me nuts when Democrats say it, but a lot of them do. Well, look, that's just not the way the system works, Ryan. We need to be more realistic than that. We need to accept that money will always be part of the political process, and we need to come to terms with it and run the Cory Bookers and the other people who can raise the big amounts of cash. What do you say to people? And by the way, I think Cory Booker symbolizes what's wrong with cash in the Democratic side of the system. That's just me. But what do you say to people who say that to you?
Well, I'd say the value of that criticism is zero. It's not the critic who counts. It's not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or the doer of deeds could have done them better. Right? That's what Teddy Roosevelt said. The credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, and strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds. So are we going to be the people that do the deeds? Are we going to be the doers? Or are we going to be the complainers and the cynics who do nothing? Because I think most progress in this country wasn't accomplished by cynics and critics. I think it was accomplished by doers and visionaries and progressive people who knew that we have to make change in our generation. It is our generation's greatest responsibility to get private money out of public elections. It's been done in other countries. It's been done in states in this country. And every generation of Americans has amended the Constitution, except for one. And that's our generation. And we have the internet, so we don't have any excuses. It's our time to get in the game, to get into that forum and to get marred, by that dust and that sweat and that blood. And thankfully, we don't have to do it like previous generation of American revolutionaries with bayonets and bullets. We can do it with phone calls, and we can do it with videos,
I think what's really important about this, Ryan, is that, is that the way you guys are going at it is at the state level. There's a reason why ALEC and the Koch brothers and the other corporate interests have concentrated so much on the state houses while the left has not. And that's because in many ways they're smarter. In many ways, they've been thinking more tactically, that if they capture the state houses, they can block things like constitutional amendments. But I think there's another thing, a counterforce that you guys have on your side, which is that everybody agrees with this.
Oh, for sure.
Most Republicans, if you talk to them, they agree with it. And I'm talking about voters, not politicians. Most Democrats agree with it. Most most independents, you talk to people, they want the money out of politics. Mm-hmm. So if you say to them, look, we're going to call our legislators, our state senators, we're going to demand action. If they don't give it, we're going to support candidates who will. If we really coalesce around this issue, I think we can get something done, and I know you feel that way too. So tell me, where can people go to find more information on Wolfpack?
For sure. Where you can go to help out and get involved and be one of the doers is wolf-pack.com. You can sign up there to volunteer or become a member, and that's the two biggest things you can do is to help us out and to keep us going and growing in the States. But I want to speak to what you just said about how popular this issue is. The dysfunction of our federal government is now the number one issue in America. It's above the economy and jobs, if you can believe it, for the first time since they've been asking the question.
Right, got about 20 seconds, just warning you.
9 out of 10 Americans say that the corruption in the government is one of their top 3 issues, and 96% of Americans say that they want to reduce the amount of corruption and the influence of corruption in our elections. So it's literally everyone in America. All we have to do is channel that passive support, that 90% passive support, into enough active support inside those state legislatures. So if you want to help us and get active, go to wolf-pack.com.
wolf-pack.com. Ryan Clayton, and as I used to say in Latin America, a people united can never be defeated.
That's right.
Great work. Keep up the great work. This is RJ Eskow. You've been listening to what was formerly Take Action News, but from now on, remember, this is the 0 Hour. We'll be back next week. Thanks for listening.
I'm Gary Johnson, former governor of New Mexico. Last year, my state became the 12th state to allow medical use of marijuana by patients who are seriously ill. Some people were surprised that a Republican governor supports medical marijuana, but I'm hardly alone. Groups like the American College of Physicians, American Nurses Association, and American Public Health Association have all acknowledged the medical value of marijuana. New research about medical marijuana is coming out almost every day, showing remarkable potential in all sorts of serious conditions, including cancer, AIDS, and chronic pain. But some in government still want to put politics and ideology ahead of public health. To learn more about medical marijuana and what you can do to help, contact the Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or visit them on the web at mpp.org. Thanks.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.